Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes sir, then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father will work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm getting.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by the wonderful author, and I'm privileged to say my friend, Rachel Wilson. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Patrick. It's awesome to be back on your channel. As always, a little cross-stream pollination that we have going on today.
Exactly.
So yeah, thanks for having me back. It's always
Of
great to do
course.
streams with you.
Of course. Well, you're always out and about doing things, and it seems like you make the rounds. You've been hitting some since the last time we talked. I think you've done pearly things, and you've done a handful of different spots that have really kind of promoted your message.
Yeah, I've got a big one coming up with Joseph Everett from What I've Learned, which is a really big YouTube channel here, and I'm very honored because most of his content isn't stuff like what I do, but he wanted to branch out a little bit, and I was kind of the first person that he picked for that. So probably one of the longest, most in-depth conversations I've had ever. So that one will drop in September, and that should be great. And should be doing Fourth Hour with Jay coming up here, I think this week, as long as we were going to do it this Friday, but the lockdown stuff kind of broke, and so they pushed us back. But yeah, some big things coming up. Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of an open panel. So come one, come all. Anybody who has some beef or want to voice their opinion, they are more than welcome to come on today. And the topic is patriarchy, something that you are, of course, noteworthy for the promotion of. And I'm going to, obviously, anybody who's familiar with my content, align with you, and our opinions are going to be very, very similar in regards to the promotion of a biblical patriarchy. Before we have people on, I wanted us to kind of go back and forth and discuss our opinions, how we see it, and how it relates to modern day contemporary culture, the left, feminism, matriarchy, some of the societal values that we're seeing. So I was going to allow you to kind of open it up wherever you wanted to go in regards to your research with feminism and its occult roots. What is the patriarchy, at least from your perspective, and then those who would be against it? We hear the feminists, whether it be second wave, third wave, or whatever wave they're in now, fourth or fifth, rail against the patriarchy. What is it that they're talking about, and what do you define the patriarchy as?
Yeah, so this is like a kind of a central theme in the stuff that I write about and talk about, which is this idea that in the last 40, 50 years, you've only heard the term patriarchy used in like a derogatory way, as though it is this inherently bad thing that's oppressive, that throughout all of human history, men have kind of conspired together, whether consciously or subconsciously, to suppress women, to keep them down, to prevent them from having any sort of choice, to prevent them from having any power or empowerment for themselves, to enslave them, if you will. And right. This concept isn't that old, really, and it comes out of the feminist movements. It comes out of mainly like the standpoint theory feminist garbage from 1970 on. They didn't really use the term patriarchy much in the earlier writings. So if you go back to like 1840s to like 1940, you don't see feminist theorists really using the term patriarchy at this point. It really became a thing with Sandra Harding and her little cohort of women's studies. They were like the first wave of women's studies professors in the 70s who really coined this term, like the oppressive patriarchy, down with the patriarchy, smash the patriarchy, that kind of thing, right? And they were the ones that proliferated this idea that patriarchy is this oppressive rule by men, and that it's intentionally created to keep women down. Now, I remember when I was younger, like much younger, before I was doing any of this stuff, maybe in my 20s, thinking about this concept one day, because it came up somewhere, and I was like, it seems like I was trying to think, like, why would men historically want to oppress the people who are, because women would be like men's mothers, men's wives, men's sisters, men's daughters. Like, it seems a little counterintuitive to me that all men just, want to hold those people down just because they're female. So
Right.
I remember questioning it in my 20s, going, that sounds kind of like, I never bought into it. I just thought, I don't really think so. I think there's dynamics between the sexes that it's more simple explanation of power dynamics and division of labor is just that men are better suited for certain things and women are better suited for things. So even in my 20s, before I thought super hard about this, I was already kind of like, I don't really think so.
Yeah.
But certainly now people are very convinced of this.
Right.
Whenever I run into somebody on Twitter or something who's not familiar with my stuff, they're always like, oh, you must hate yourself. You must hate women. You're a pick me. You just want male attention. You're grifting for male attention. I get charged with this all the time. And I understand why to a certain degree, because there are people online who do that, right? So I'm like, okay, I get it. But like, all you'd have to do is read one Substack article I've written or watch one show that I've done to see that that's really not what I'm doing.
Right. Or know you in person. You've lived these values. You have 5 children and you've homeschooled them. And so it's a little bit different than just being an unmarried person or somebody who doesn't have that life experience, that you kind of walk the walk in regards to how you value family and children and look at the world.
Yeah, if I was a single younger woman with my boobs pushed up to my chin saying, oh my gosh, patriarchy's so awesome, also subscribe to my OnlyFans. Like, I could see how you'd go, this girl is a grifter. She doesn't believe what she's saying. But like, a big part of what I'm trying to do from the beginning is take the term patriarchy and kind of give it the proper definition it deserves. It shouldn't be synonymous with men keeping women down. And you'll hear feminists say things like, oh, men are afraid of us having, any kind of power. Men are afraid of us having any sort of agency. They're afraid that if we're not enslaved to them, that they won't be able to keep us because they're scared of like a strong woman, right? We intimidate them. And I'm like, again, this is another thing that doesn't make a lot of sense when you think about it for more than 30 seconds. You think the men are scared of you? What do you think that they think is going to happen? You're going to come in and take all their infrastructure jobs? Well, that hasn't happened in 100 years. You're going to step up and start taking over society like in the Barbie movie? No, it's not how things work at all. Now, I would say that to the extent one sex is suppressing the other, I think you could make a much better argument that it is not the men suppressing and oppressing the women these days. Right. And I have made that case multiple times. But even more than that, like the most recent Substack article I did was called Are Patriarchs Protectors or are they the problem? Right. And I went over all this data in the last 45 years on things like spousal abuse, child abuse, and all the different research and data from across different sectors of the country, where every single data point we have shows us that men are not the ones who are like the threat, right? Men aren't the ones who are a threat to their wives or to their kids. Really, the threat comes when the mother removes the father from the home and like other men who have no vested interest in the future of the children or the well-being of their wife comes into the picture. So and I just had a debate where this woman actually tried to argue that men have the monopoly on cruelty. She said, I'm not kidding. And she wasn't joking around. She wasn't just being hyperbolic. She really had herself convinced that men have a special capacity for cruelty innately that women do not have. And you'll hear this a lot where people insist, was it just Robert Downey Jr. who came out and said if women were in charge of all the world governments, we wouldn't have war.
Yeah, I saw that.
These silly ideas that you hear repeated over and over, and all you would have to do is you go, is that true? Let's take a look and let's do a little investigating. And it doesn't take very long before you realize, of course, that's not true. But people do believe this. It is a very widely held belief because of propaganda. The propaganda has been super effective. And I just tweeted 2 things in the last couple days with the specific intention of kind of proving this theory. Like I was having a private conversation where I said, like, people don't understand just how effective the propaganda has been and how saturated the culture is. So I was thinking about it and I thought, what could I tweet that would like really just demonstrate this concept? So all I said was, in the 16 years we've been married, Andrew has never done any housework. He doesn't do laundry. He doesn't do dishes. He doesn't do any of that ever at all. That's all I said. I didn't include any moral ought claims. I didn't include any imperative that other people ought live this way. Nothing like that. I simply just stated a fact, which is Andrew does not do housework. Now, people, number one, accused me of lying and thought that couldn't possibly be true because, like, how could you ever live if your husband didn't do the housework? And I'm like, no, I'm not lying. This is really true. Like, I think he might have like loaded dishes one time when I was like really, really sick. But honestly, I don't even know if that happened because by that time the kids were older and they could all do dishes and stuff. But I mean, people wanted to insist that they called Andrew a toddler. They called him a man-child. They said I must have some kind of weird fetish, that I don't really want a real man. I want a baby. That I have Stockholm syndrome, that I am enslaved, that, all these it's got like 400 million or 400,000 views. Now,
Wow.
this one tweet
Wow.
of people just losing their mind, hundreds of quote tweets of people just outraged that Andrew doesn't do the dishes. Now, I went on to explain that he works 60 or 70 hours a week so that I don't have to work, that he maintains a 5-acre property, that he takes care of, if anything mechanical in the house breaks, he's the guy that fixes it.
Right.
If the drains back up, he's got to fix that. If the car breaks down, he fixes that. He does plenty. So, like, if you just are objective enough to think for 5 seconds, I've got a pretty good deal. Like, this is a pretty good deal for me, right?
Right.
But that is not what people heard. And that is like just knee-jerk reaction, just a reflex, like a guttural reaction to me saying my husband doesn't do housework. People lost their minds.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, this went well. So the next thing I tweeted was, when we go to a barbecue or a party, I bring Andrew his plate of food and a drink. Now, Patrick's hung out with us, and he can tell you that I do indeed do that.
Yes.
Again, people either didn't believe it because
and if Andrew was with friends, you'd probably do it for the whole friend group.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So it's not just, it's something it's in your nature to like.
Yeah, like when we were in Nashville, I got up and made breakfast for all the guys at the Airbnb and just gave you guys breakfast. Like, I don't know.
Right.
But to these people, me doing this is slavery. I had women telling me I don't love myself. I have no self-esteem. I have internalized misogyny. I must have been abused growing up to believe that this is okay to do. I had men, the boomer and Gen X men might have been the worst of everybody because they were like, I would get it myself and I would never let a woman get me a plate of food. And I'm not a child and I would be happy to help with the housework. Just the level of cope was so insane on these 2 tweets. And people just went wild. If you guys go and look at some of the stuff, you're just going to be like, wow. The name calling, just horrible. People felt so justified saying horrible things about me. Yes, free Rachel, please.
Hashtag free Rachel.
People saying stuff like blink twice if you need help, stuff like that. And just because I said something that for all of human history was super normal until a few decades ago, right? Oh, I bring my husband a plate of food. Oh my gosh. And, like Andrew doesn't do the housework. I do the housework. Now, I wasn't complaining. I wasn't saying that's like some horrible, oh, help me. I just have to do all this laundry. And it's like, I asked people, I'm like, have you ever thought of why you react that way? Why? Like, why did you react this way to such a simple, totally benign tweet, right? And it's because the entire culture has been saturated in this propaganda for 40 years, insisting to women that if they do the housework, it's slavery. But if the man does the housework, it's not slavery, it's like valor, right? It's like
Yeah, he's
virtuous for
supposed to.
yeah, if a
That's how
man
he's a
does
good
housework,
man.
it's a virtue. But if a woman's doing housework, it's slavery. And I'm like,
Right.
do you guys see the cognitive dissonance? Do you see the double think? Do you see how this is completely illogical? I could say my husband is working hard all day, saving children from wildfires or something. He's rescuing children from floodwaters, and they'd be like, "But did he come home and do the dishes, though?" It would never be enough. I could say that he's president of the United States. He's the leader of the free world. It wouldn't matter what the man was doing. It's like the measure of whether or not he's a good guy is if he's willing to help me with housework and get his own beer. It's
Right.
and so I did this on purpose. Not that it's a lie. This is totally true. It's how we live, and it's not oppressive. It's not enslavement. I'm doing just fine. All of you concerned trolls who are so worried about me and my well-being, you can see I am healthy and doing fine. But no, it just totally demonstrated the absolute insanity and how conditioned people are, how deeply conditioned people are to think that traditional gender roles are oppressive enslavement, torture. Women are miserable if they have to do the dishes, but if the man does the dishes, somehow that's fine, right? So
Right.
to me, the whole patriarchy thing is like, it's a very simple concept that worked for all of human history. It really did. And people have learned a false history. They've learned the gender studies department version of history, which is total lies. I had just did another episode with Pearl going over a lot of this too, explaining a lot of the lies that the propaganda was built on. So, I mean, it's like I can't tell it all to people in one tweet. So I hope they will at least get curious enough to go read the things I've written and
Right.
look at all the source material that I provide in case they think I'm full of it. But no, patriarchy means that the men, because the men are responsible, the males of our society are responsible for whether or not civilization lasts. Okay. They're responsible for the health and well-being of the women and children because they have to be. As Andrew has famously argued in many debates that have gone viral now, at the end of the day, any illusion of women's rights is going to be enforced by men anyway.
Right.
So if women have rights, it's because there are men willing to enforce those rights on their behalf. This is an inescapable truth. I'm sorry if people don't like it. I'm sorry if it rubs up against your programming and makes you queasy and upset and you start sweating and having convulsions because you hear me say this, but it's just an inescapable fact of human nature. Human nature is an objective thing. We see how things work in the real world, and this is how it is. So because men have this great responsibility, right? I always say that when the grid goes down, there's no such thing as a feminist. If you're trapped in floodwaters, if you're in a high-rise building in a fire, you're not hoping the 5'2" feminist comes to rescue you. I'm sorry, but you're not.
Right.
And if there was a massive cyber attack and the entire electrical grid went down, you would not be counting on little 120-pound women to protect you, to get the grid back up, to make things survivable. You would not. It would be the men. And because of modern technology, people have this delusion that we don't need men, that, the power just comes on by itself. The roads just build and maintain themselves. This whole modern world we live in just magically got plopped in our laps, and men and women are now the same. That is an illusion. In fact, I think you could argue it's somewhat of a demonic delusion in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And that was some of the things that I wrote down in regards to patriarchy and some of the benefits. I wrote down the maintaining of law and order because it's, again, generally speaking, and forgive me for repeating so much, but I would say masculinity and patriarchy is about the maintaining and the erection of boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I put down, I believe a patriarchy actually protects women and children more so when we look at the contemporary society and the idea that men can be, that there's such things as female penises and that women can, or men can be women, and that, Leah Thomas, some man can compete against women in swimming and go from the 700th male swimmer in college to the #1 female swimmer, dress in front of women, share a female locker room. That patriarchy one, it forces, yes, there's a kind of a distinct honor culture among men in a patriarchal system, but also, as you pointed out, there's more responsibility for the protection of your mother, for your sister, for your wife, for your daughters, for your children, generally speaking. And we look at the problems with young men right now, and a nihilistic worldview where there's no meaning, I think, is tied to a sort of collapse of a sort of patriarchal duty. And so the basis for my promotion of patriarchy is obviously going to be biblical. And being an Orthodox Christian, we still maintain a patriarchal understanding of priests, the hierarchy of the church. Again, a continuation going all the way back essentially to Abraham in regards to this patriarchal tradition of men following God and maintaining a sort of order. And so I claim that patriarchy is ordained by God based on the biblical values, that it gives men more responsibilities, which is something that our culture and trying to get young boys to become more emotional, less stoic. I mean, these are characteristics, and I'm really thankful looking back now. You know, I've said before, my dad was a military guy, and so he did not let me get away with like being overly emotional or anything like that. And so it forced me to develop for him, more masculine qualities. But looking back now as an adult man, I'm so thankful for that because I can see my emotional stability, my ability to deal with stress, my ability to go into confrontation. You know, this is something that Andrew and I talked about is, avoidance of confrontation amongst young men. Now, nobody likes the guy who's like constantly going on and trying to pick a fight or arguments or nothing. Of course, nobody likes that type of person, but there's something masculine about a man who doesn't shy away from confrontation. And so we live in a culture now with social media where there's all this backbiting, that confrontation, they don't want to do it face to face. They want to do it on social media through gossiping. Again, a very feminine way to express oneself. And so I think that patriarchy promotes nuclear families because of this idea that, again, a biblical idea that you get married to one woman. Now, obviously, in the Old Testament, there was different understandings of marriage and how that all worked. But from the New Testament forward, it's one man, one woman, and then it's children. It's a nuclear family. And the point of marriage is not only a sacrament of the church, it's not only the unification of male and female to become whole, to serve each other, but it's to have children. And so any sort of marriage that cannot be functioning towards the reproductive right of children, I mean, that's not a true marriage. Now, okay, somebody's sterile, that's totally separate. That is totally separate. A woman who can't have children, she is not any less of a woman, or a man who can't have children, he's not any less of a man. That's something totally different. But on the general understandings,
right,
the point of a marriage is to have children. And we look at this culture that we're existing in now, this sort of, and I wanted to sort of backtrack too, when you were talking about the academic ideas of women's studies and gender studies and this whole thing about the patriarchy, is when you go back into it, it's a sort of Marxist lens. So Marxism is all about a materialist understanding of power dynamics.
Yep.
And so therefore Marxist lens, whether it be critical theory or whatever academic framework you want to look at, queer theory, gender theory, you look at the world in regards to power dynamics, because this comes out of a postmodern turn where there is no objective truth. So the only thing of interest then academically is looking at power dynamics and then saying, oh, well, men have power in this way and women don't have power in this way. Therefore, it's oppressive, and therefore there's inherent tension. And what you were highlighting is that, no, it's not necessarily inherent tension that, my husband does all the heavy lifting. He takes care of the homestead or the house or the 5 acres or the cars, and then I take care of inside the house. Yeah. There's not a tension there. It's a collaboration. It's a cooperation. Right. And again, women can't see this because of this Marxist programming to look at everything as conflict.
Yes, exactly. And so the reason I was kind of harping on responsibility and trying to, again, we're always just fighting this conditioning and this programming, because women will say insane things to me like, well, I would be a soldier on the front lines. I would be a Navy SEAL. I'll be a firefighter. It's like, first of all, no, you won't, because you haven't. You've had 100 years to do that. And none of you want to be in the logging industry. None of you want to clean sewers. None of you want to be deep sea fishermen. No women have passed the Navy SEAL training yet. The amount of women who are actually in frontline combat positions is like a tiny percentage. even though we have had women in the military for a while. And it is because, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. I keep trying to say this because remember, people will accuse me of being a feminist because I shoot guns and I lift weights. But what that means is I can do more than the average woman. Okay, I'm stronger than the average woman, and I can damn sure use a firearm better than the average woman, let me tell you. And even I know that I'm not going to go into a firefight with men because, like, I'm on par with them. If I'm in a self-defense situation, that's the best equalizer for me to have. But it doesn't mean that my husband wouldn't be the better guy to, like, go to the top of the steps if someone's in the basement in the middle of the night. He would be better. Same thing with all these things. So if men have this inherent responsibility, I think it's absurd to not give them the authority that should go with that. It has to. And I ask people, I'll be like, so men have to have all this responsibility. You want them to build the modern world. You want them to be a real man. You want them to be 6 feet tall and have 6-pack abs and make 6 figures. But you also want them to you want them to do all that, but with no authority. You want women to run everything. You want women to be in charge of everything, but you also want men to have this inherent responsibility to literally ensure the survival of mankind. That makes no sense. Right. It's completely irrational. And the only reason people argue for that is due to this conditioning and due to this programming. And a lot of it comes like when I get men specifically that really want to like fight me on this, if I can get them to answer me honestly, 9 times out of 10, they were raised by a single mom who kind of raised them to believe that like it's their responsibility to make sure that she's happy, to make sure that she's feeling okay, like her emotional well-being rests upon them doing what she thinks they should be doing.
Yeah.
It's a very, very toxic thing for a young boy to grow up with no dad and just a single mom, especially if she is a more feminist single mom who is kind of putting this daddy role on him or this I must be happy at everyone else's expense kind of a thing. And this
you mentioned that in your Substack, the long-term turnout rate of single parent children, those raised by a father and those raised by a mother, and the more, again, based on measures like incarceration, productivity of their life, career.
Every risk metric you can think of. Every homelessness, juvenile incarceration,
drug addiction,
abuse, depression, like mental problems, even stuff like ADHD. By far the highest rates we see are in kids who have no dad in the home across the board on all these things. And then we also see that when it comes to like abuse, women are the primary perpetrators of abuse against children, not men. And feminists
that woman that you shared on Twitter, that woman in the UK, that she's now the largest serial killer of children in British history.
Yes. Yeah. And well, feminists will say, well, wait a minute, Rachel, wait a minute. That sounds bad, but there's a reason. And the reason is that women have all the burden of the child care. Women have to spend all the time with the children. And that's the only reason that statistic looks so bad. However, they have a little problem on their hands, which is that since 1980, men's primary custody or sole custody of children has increased by like 400%. It's gone way up. So we have a lot more men now that are single dads or have primary custody of their children than we ever used to have.
Right.
So if their theory was correct, we should have seen that statistic change somewhat. We should have seen like, among these single dads or these dads who have primary custody, we see similar rates of abuse to moms with primary or sole custody, but we don't. It's significantly lower. I want to say it's in my article, but I want to say it's like far less than half, and it's still like way more than half that it's the mother when there is abuse. So this idea that men are inherently cruel and oppressive, but women are inherently benevolent and kind is wrong, and it's incorrect. And another point you could use to make this, to illustrate this idea is that men do have a monopoly on force, and they have had a monopoly on force throughout human history. If men were inherently these monsters that the patriarchy is evil, smash the patriarchy people believe, then you have to explain, how well women have done and how the human race has flourished, and the fact that, if men were these evil creatures, they could literally hunt us for sport and just keep a few of us in a cage to have their way with whenever they want.
Right.
But that's not what it's been. They built civilizations. They built technology to make women's lives better, to make children's lives easier. Like the fact that we are allowed to even have the illusion of rights, honestly, is kind of this proof that men are benevolent. Men are benevolent. And I think the reason for this is because when boys are growing up, I was talking about rough and tumble play earlier on Twitter too, about how it's really good for dads to, do the rough and tumble play with little boys, because boys need to learn when they're little that they do have an ability to hurt people, right? Physically, if they get carried away, if they lose their temper, if they get really angry or something, and that sometimes even with playing with their friend, they don't mean to hurt somebody, but they can, because men are pretty strong and capable of using force. So it teaches them where that boundary is of like, they learn, oh, dad's much bigger and stronger than me. I got to kind of be careful. I can't just come at him, because all he has to do is, just kind of give me a little and I'll fall down. And I can accidentally hurt my brother if I hit him too hard, or, things like that. So boys learn from a young age where boundaries are. They learn that there's a hierarchy, that you don't just go straight to the top, right? Like there's a pecking order among men, and men cooperate within a hierarchy. Women don't have this. Women don't experience this. We don't have much of an opportunity to learn what happens when you do get violent with another person, because little girls are less likely to do that stuff. And when they do, they tend to get less punishment. I mean, this is super clear. The statistics are very clear. Even in adult situations, women who are convicted of the same crimes as men get far less harsh sentences, shorter sentences, right?
Yep.
And then on top of that, women are pretty, and men do overall tend to want to make us happy. They want to be nice to us. They want to treat us different than they treat men. So they treat us with kind of like, I don't want to say kid gloves, but they take a lighter hand with women. And so this is where you see, like when there's an Antifa rally and Patriot Front shows up or somebody, and they're clashing, you'll see these little Antifa girls in flip-flops try to punch a 6-foot veteran in the face.
Right.
And not have any idea that there might be a consequence to that. So when women do get in a position of authority over someone weaker than them, I think that might be one of the reasons why we see them tend to abuse or overstep that authority, because they're not as practiced and they're not as used to like the repercussions of what happens if you do that.
And it's, I would argue that's also tied to the sort of, I'm not for violence in any way, but certainly our culture, we can see it moving, trying to make violence less and less prominent in certain aspects. Now, obviously, crime is on the dramatic increase because of the lawlessness of our society, which is making everything less safe. But you're making a great point, because at church I was watching the little kids interact. And obviously we're in an Orthodox Christian setting. And so when the little boys that are the same age as the little girls get a little bit too rough, the parents say, hey, that's a little girl. You don't do that. And then to differentiate how the boys and the girls play. Yeah. And this is, I would say, a sort of patriarchal understanding of the differences between the roles, and that boys protect little girls and women, generally speaking, as you grow up. And so when we, again, to use the metaphor I always use, is that men are the castle walls and women and children are the jewels inside, that men have an obligation to be self-sacrificial in the protection of those that are more vulnerable. Women and children are much more vulnerable than men. And so as we move into a society where men aren't given the opportunity to be protective over women or children, we can see that in the court systems, we can see that in the general dynamics of dating, but there's also this misunderstanding of violence. So then women, like you said, some skinny little feminist may punch a grown man in the face and think that there's no consequences here, and that, and everything has consequences. And men, as I've talked with Andrew and other people, there's always this undertone of violence when men are friends, and even if you are friends, if there's a dramatic break in disrespect and one crosses a boundary, it can often lead into physical fighting, and that's how you solve the situation. And so you look then at this feminist imperative where it's total disrespect towards men. You can see the animosity growing in amongst men who can't build strong, these traditionally minded and framed relationships with women. And
Yeah.
so then violence is like, it's building up. You can sense the tensions, the sexual tensions in our culture, and how exactly we're going to resolve these, I think, is going to be a real problem. I think that's also why the manosphere and dating and things like, Pearly Things and her podcast are so popular,
Yeah.
because people are wanting to resolve this tension. The women aren't getting it, and the society itself is coddling them and perpetuating them to be the ways in which they are, which I think is incredibly detrimental towards the long-term trajectory of society.
Yeah. Yeah, well that's the irony of people always accusing me of hating women, because I will often, tweet something that some woman is saying or some woman is doing. We've all seen the viral videos of women saying incomprehensibly horrible things, doing ridiculous things, and I will, put that on social media and say, this is where we are. You think this is good for women? You think that, these girls that go on the whatever podcast and talk about, they have an OnlyFans, they have a body count of 100, they love to like break men's souls, or you guys have heard like the horrible things that some of them will say. That's just like, what? And it seems so crazy. And people will think, oh, they're just picking the worst ones and putting them out there for outrage purposes. But I'm telling you, I talk to women all the time, all day long on social media. I have daughters that are in their 20s, and this is the norm now. This is what we're dealing with. Young women are acting totally insane, and it's because they have to live with cognitive dissonance and doublethink, where on one half of their brain believes they're every bit as good as men, if not better. They can do anything a man can do and probably can do it better. I don't need a man for anything. If I'm going to have a man in my life, it's going to be because I want him, not because I need him. All this Beyonce, strong girl, Taylor Swift nonsense that gets pounded into their head the whole time they're growing up. And then they end up with these extremely high rates of mental illness. We see a big problem people don't talk about is alcoholism among women now, and how bad it is. It's much more detrimental to them physically, even if they're drinking like the same relative amount to their weight as a man. It just is more harmful to our brains and internal organs than it is to men. Women are just not built like men. I'm sorry to tell everybody that this is a biological reality.
Breaking news.
So the consequence of trying to live with this doublethink your whole life of, I'm a strong, independent woman, I don't need a man, but also, every woman's going to have the experience where like maybe her car breaks down on the side of the road, or she's alone at night and she hears a weird noise in the house and there's no man there. Like there's these moments where I think these women know this is not computing. Like my beliefs about the world are not jiving and making sense. But to break from that, I open my book with this. I open my book with explaining just what you face as a woman if you dare go against this narrative, this feminist ethos we all exist in now. If you dare question it, if you dare speak against it, everyone around you will freak out, including men. Like I said, it's more the older men. It's like the boomer and Generation X. They really got indoctrinated with this stuff because they grew up in a time before there was alternative media, right? There was no counter to it at all.
And this notion of progress that they were indoctrinated with, where, you can see the Gen Z males, so like the studies that have come out regarding their political values, but certainly the general counterculture, if you will, pushing back and promoting men's rights, where, this idea that the world's got better and better, a lot of people aren't buying it anymore, where I think, unfortunately for the boomers, they were kind of brought up with that, with the moon landing. I don't believe in, but you see this whole propagandistic reality tunnel that they've lived in, and so they can't see it.
No, they can't. And I see this all the time in talking to them on social media, where the reason they get so emotional, there's no reason to get emotional about Rachel bringing Andrew a plate of food. That is not logical. But the reason people get so emotional about it is because I'm rubbing up on that programming. I'm rubbing up against this conditioning that is like super deep inside of them, where their worldview tells them that women were historically oppressed and lived this hellish life of enslavement. And that
Yeah.
if I talk about patriarchy and say, no, patriarchy is actually just a name for the natural order of things. It's a name for the way that this world was created, the natural hierarchy of how humans live. It's not bad. It's not wrong. It doesn't
Right.
mean hell for women. It doesn't mean enslavement for women. It actually provides a safer, more stable, less chaotic environment for women to be women, for us to be mothers, for us to be homemakers, caretakers, for us to live without fear of being vulnerable because we are the weaker sex. Patriarchy is actually the protective thing. And that's why I wrote that whole piece going over all of the data showing that, cohabitation is far more dangerous than being married. So
Right.
women are under this impression that if you live with your boyfriend, it's safer because, well, if he becomes violent or abusive, I'll just leave. That is not reflected in the statistics at all. Cohabitation is far higher risk for abuse than a marriage. Okay.
And especially for the children that
Yes,
have no
children
biological
too.
relationship to said man. And there's all these studies of, potential. Now, obviously, men that fill that stepfather role, it differs and
Sure.
people have different values. So I'm not
Yeah.
trying to cast any, massive generalization, but
No.
it causes like young girls to go to menstruate earlier because they're exposed to the testosterone and pheromones of a non-biological male. Where if it was her actual father, she would
Yeah.
mature at a more natural rate. Where like a younger girl that has a guy come in, all of a sudden she'll start menstruating because her body is responding to the pheromones and the hormones. So you look at the sex abuse, you look at the interest that a man has invested in a child. I mean, that's a lifelong investment.
Yeah.
And I've known great stepfathers, so it's not, again, it's
Sure.
not all men, but
No,
it's
we're not
certainly not a
saying that step
natural.
parents are bad, but we're saying, like, statistically, when a woman divorces and kicks out the father of the children, number one, people probably don't know this, but women who divorce, only about half of them ever get remarried. And they all think, so this is another delusion of women, thanks to the movies and the music and all this other stuff. A woman will get a divorce at, like, let's say 32, right? She's been married to the father of her 3 kids. She's 32 years old. She wants to have her hot girl summer 2.0 or whatever the reason is. And she thinks, this guy, the passion is gone. I'm bored, whatever it is. I'm going to get rid of him. And it'll just be like it was when I was 22, and I'll just get the next guy, right? And what happens is they find out, oh, I've already been married, I've already got kids with another man, and I'm older. And now now I've got emotional baggage from my last relationship and bad habits from it. And so now none of the men who are interested meet my standard. And so they're stuck in
Yep.
this. So they're stuck in the Tinder carousel. They're perpetually single. They have boyfriends coming through the house. That is the most common scenario. For women who are lucky like me, and they get a wonderful man who becomes the permanent fixture. And I was really young when that happened, and I did not get a divorce by choice at all. It was completely not up to me, but out of respect for my ex, who is still around, and the father of my older kids, I'm not going to go into that. Everybody always wants to get in my business, but
Of course.
it was never something I wanted. I did everything possible to prevent it. It was a personal, private thing going on with him that I had no control over. Okay. We were young. It happens. I understand that. This is the other thing I say. People think I hate single moms. I'm like, I was a single mom for a short
Right.
period of time.
They don't know
I
your story.
No, I don't hate single moms. It's not that. It's that if you look at the statistics, if you look at the data, most women are single by choice. Most single moms are single by choice. And their reasons, everybody thinks it's because of abuse, cheating, and beating, right? It must be cheating and beating. That's not true. It's
Right.
actually, those are pretty far down the list of reasons. When you look at all the surveys they've done, like divorce attorneys and courts and stuff will put out some data on this. The top reasons are things like lack of commitment, which is a very vague way of saying we just weren't feeling it anymore,
Right.
or he was holding me back from my career, or wasn't attracted to him anymore. I wanted to find myself. Finances will often be a big problem, and that's usually the result of the two income trap, right? And this, now that we're both working, we're going to constantly fight over the division of labor in the home. The woman always thinks the man needs to be doing more house chores, and the man always thinks that the woman doesn't appreciate him. We're just in a position where I find it hard to believe that people are willing to argue that this is better. Like the situation that most people are in now, if you look at the way kids are growing up, if you look at how unstable society is, if you look at the fact, like Patrick and I have done multiple shows on these things, talking about how half of women now are never going to have a child, how
Right.
the only reason divorce rates have gone down is because nobody's even getting married anymore.
Exactly. Well, I talked about this at church today. One of the gentlemen at church, he works in the hospital, and again, my fiance is with me. We went to church, and then we were having a private conversation, and he was talking about how unhappy all the nurses that he works with and female doctors are, and he's like, yeah, it's crazy. And he's not somebody, this is not somebody plugged into the manosphere. This is not somebody listening to Fresh and Fit or Rollo. Not at all. This dude,
Yeah.
he's totally removed of this, living his life as a professional in the hospital. And he's like, yeah, it's crazy. All the women I work with, they're in their 30s and 40s. And it's amazing how angry they are when it comes to the dating market, and how, they want this really good man. And he was like, yeah, a lot of them, they tell me all the time how bad they want children. And he had a friend that also worked in the hospital that was divorced, and he was older. So then he was looking for a wife, and how these older women are throwing themselves at him because they feel the urgency now. They're 39, 40, and they want to have children, and they can, and they fell for the lie that, oh, patriarchy bad. Don't submit to a man bad. Oh, girl, you got to get your money, right? You don't allow your husband to be the sole breadwinner.
Yeah.
And they get their career, they do their education, whether it's 4 years, 6 years, 8 years of college, they get their job, and they're not any happier. In fact, he said, you talk to any of them in their 30s and 40s, none of them are happy.
No.
And it's because their personal lives aren't there. And then the ones that are postmenopausal, they've lost, they don't have the opportunity to have children. They don't have the opportunity to have that nuclear family, which I think all women really want. Maybe they all don't want them, but the vast majority want that family, because that is your ultimate experience of love, is having children and a husband who loves you, and you guys go through life together in that sort of commitment. And it's amazing how, obviously online, this is very popular to talk about, but being at church, it was interesting that a man totally removed to this has totally picked up on it. And he's like, man, we really got to tell these young girls to get married earlier and really promote family values, because, they're missing out. They're not getting, and we're like, I didn't get into all the online stuff. I'm like, yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And this is the thing, right? So if I'm the one that hates women, right? If Rachel just hates the women, then why am I the one who's willing to take all of the slings and arrows, right? Because it's not always easy to be the one of a handful of women daring to talk about this, because like I said, even the older men, like my dad's generation, or the men that are like my age or a little bit older, they really bought into this idea that the way to protect their daughter is to make sure she gets an education. She has to have a degree, and she has to have her own money and a career, because this was sold as the protection against bad men, right? The only way to protect women from bad men is to make sure they're financially independent and have their own everything. And then, they won't end up trapped with an abusive man. But that hasn't worked out that way at all. In fact, it's so insane to me, because it's like, why have women invest all this time, money, and energy into a career, and then you expect that when they're 30 or 35, they're going to flip a switch and just go into mom mode? That's the other big problem, is that even women who realize soon enough, and they're like, oh, shoot, I do want to get married and have kids. Okay, let me get this done. And they're 35. It's a big struggle to switch your whole worldview, all of your priorities, all of your habits, just switch it all over in a short period of time and adjust well. It's very difficult. So I always give the opposite advice and tell women get married and have your family young. There's time in the second half of your life to do other things. But when I say that, people think I'm endangering women. They think I am exposing them to unnecessary risk and that I must only be saying these things because I have some kind of hatred for women. And it's like, not only is that just silly because I am a woman and I have 4 daughters, but, and then of course it's always me getting accused of projecting my, oh, you stop telling people how to live. I'm like, you're all telling everyone how to live.
Right.
Feminists tell people how to live all the time. Beyonce and Taylor Swift can tell women how to live. Cardi B can tell people how to live. But if I say, here's how I see it, and based on all my experience, here's what I think, and here's a bunch of data and history and research to back it up, I'm this like crazy psycho who just wants to hurt women. And it's very absurd. So I hope today, if any of the haters are watching, I hope that you're willing to call in and just talk to us, and let's go through the ideas. Let's walk
say, come on.
Process. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to do that.
This is an open forum. Anybody anybody has showed up yet. Nobody's hopped on. If you disagree and you want to voice your opinion, please, we will give you the floor. We will not interrupt you. We will not, no ad hominems. You can voice your opinion. Tell us how you feel about the world, how you feel about society, or why you think patriarchy is bad or matriarchy is good, or whatever it may be. You are free to do so. So guys, smash that like. The line is open. Let me share that link again. And there's one thing I wanted to say before we let people on. Again, we have one person just joined, but he's going to be in favor of what we have to say. If we really, really would hope that if you disagree, please come on. We want somebody who disagrees. Please come on. We'll totally give you respect. No problem at all. But I wanted to highlight everything you're suggesting for somebody who would say, you know what, Rachel, I can see your point, but don't you also see how this is a natural evolution of society, or this is a natural form of progress? And my rebuttal would be, it's absolutely not. And you could look at this from an academic perspective in regards to the nature of ideas and how these things get prompted and put in society. And this animosity towards the masculine, I would say, is in part and parcel not only to Marxist theory, but tied to this idea of undermining the central pillar of Christendom, which is called phallogocentrism, which is about the privileging of the masculine to protect, to provide, to, again, have those responsibilities in society.
Yes.
As you would agree, we are the more expendable sex. Not that we're less valuable. Absolutely not. Right. We're equal valuable, but that's why we go to war. And that's why I was having a conversation with somebody recently, and they're like, Russia has this, they have this goal to have like 1.5 million army soldiers within like the next decade. Those are all men. And they're like, yeah, but the US, we already have like 5 million or so. I forget what number they said. And it's like, you really think that's the same? I just watched a video of somebody going around asking army soldiers why they joined the military.
I've seen
that. Vast majority of them were female. And that you think that's the same thing as a country like China or Russia, who have a trained male militia, a trained male military? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But this phallogocentrism is the privileging of the masculine for that role in society to defend, to build, to construct, to maintain order. And then logos, the idea that there's boundaries, there are ideas that there's correct morality, there's correct truth, and that we're going to focus on the center. That Jacques Derrida talked about how we need to focus on a sort of feminist marginalism. And that's exactly what we're seeing in society. Why is it that people that, represent 2% of the US population are in like every other commercial or every other advertisement? And it has to do with these academic ideas that really got going in the 60s, that the way they're going to undermine Christian civilization is that they're going to focus on the feminist values and then focus on the people at the margins and reject the people that reject the majority and make the majority the margin. And you look at the rhetoric in regards to the MAGA people or American conservatives or the flyover states. That's exactly the culture we live in, is to mock the majority, privilege the minority, and in fact, make the minority then the emphasis and focus of the majority. And this, again, these aren't unnatural. These were ideas that were propagated in the late 50s into the 1960s, and how they're going to overturn Western civilization. This is not organic. It's inorganic. It's deliberate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's deliberate. I'm doing a show Wednesday made by Jim Bob's going to be on my channel, and we are going to go over feminist standpoint theory, because that's the root of where all of these ideas come from. It completely saturated academia, and we're going to talk about who funded it, how did this happen, and what the heck is standpoint theory. And it's total insanity. It's complete inversion. These are people who hate Christianity. They believe in a new world, Mother Earth, goddess. That's why you always see ecofeminism. The feminists are always vegans, and they're always climate activists. It's for a reason. That's not a mistake at all. It's part of the same worldview, where they see Mother Earth as this natural state of perfection, this Edenic natural state that is ruined by men and their toxic masculinity, and that men are the exploiters and destroyers of Mother Earth, right? And that's why they literally came out and said the truth, this concept that there's such a thing as objective truth, is in and of itself problematic. Because they're like, yeah, you're going to show us all this science and all this data and all these statistics, and you're going to refer to the natural world and how things actually work. But we don't like any of that, right? We want to do away with all of that. We want to do away with the natural order. We want to do away with human beings as they were created in the image of God, and we want to invert it into something opposite of that. So
exactly,
the genesis of the ideas is really important. But we'll see what people have to say today.
Yeah, we got a few people in that we're going to bring on it. Before we hop into that, I want to address just the few super chats that came in. Major shout out and thank you to AC. When you were talking about modern day women or young women, he threw in $1.99, said "Ree." Then AC threw in another $1.99. He said, could transhuman invalidate that? AC, if you want to hop on, if you're able to clarify, I'm not exactly sure what you were referring to in regards to can transhumanism invalidate that. I don't know if you meant the role of men or exactly, but feel free to clarify. And then he also threw in $1.99, says ice cream good, men's souls. So
I think he's referring to those NPC girls.
Oh yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for that clarification, Rachel. And then AC, my brother, throws in another $4.99 and says this needs to be a crucible beer drinking competition between Andrew and Not So Erudite to prove women can't drink more. Yeah, that would be a funny show for sure. And then Jacob Simmons throws in $4.99 and says, is recognizing femme/demonic propaganda like Barbie, T Swift, Beyonce necessary for shifting one's worldview away from this nonsense to an orthodox worldview? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they certainly can't go together. And this is one of the people I was thinking about, who am I talking to when I wrote my book, was these modern women who believe they are Christians and say they are Christians, but they're like, oh my God, I'm a Swiftie. I can't wait for the Beyonce concert, right? And their heroes are these like blatantly satanic feminists who hate men and truly believe in like goddess worship. I am a goddess who should be worshipped because of my sexuality, and I have power and control over men using my sexuality, and so should you, right? So these women will buy into this and think they can, again, we're talking about this double think, this cognitive dissonance of thinking you can have both of these worldviews at the same time, that you can be Christian and that you can also be a feminist. The two are diametrically opposed by nature. So
yeah,
if you want to move toward an orthodox worldview, you can't bring Taylor Swift with you. Sorry.
No. And for an orthodox worldview, again, depending on, now, obviously there's people who, these value systems are on a spectrum. And so there's plenty of orthodox people and women who may not, abide by even the opinions I or Rachel are putting out. That's okay. However, when you make the vows, like in an orthodox marriage, the idea that the man is signing up to die for the woman, that's explicit. The woman is dying to her will to serve her husband. The man is dying to his will to serve and protect and provide for his wife. These are explicit value structures. in an Orthodox worldview, you're not going to be able to take some radical feminist understanding of gender roles and play that into an Orthodox fronema or an Orthodox relationship. It just doesn't jive. So thank you so much, Jacob Simmons. I appreciate that, my brother. All right. So we got Jet and Dr. Vagisil in here. What's going on, guys? Oh, Jet, you're muted. There you go. Gotcha.
All right. I just wanted to come on the stream tonight just to say how much of an outrage it is to see these horrible misogynists out here promulgating this horrible message tonight. Nah, I'm joking. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you got any comments on the topic at hand?
You know, I had them, I lost them. They'll come to me. We were talking in the stream chat though about just how women are pretty much not held accountable for what it is that they do in society. You know, like men, we will be pulled aside and told, "Hey, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. That's wrong." But a woman does the same thing. Totally okay. I think the most obvious example would be infidelity, adultery, cheating on your spouse, cheating on your partner. You know, it's almost seen as, and I'm not glorifying when men, you know, have these high body counts, but it does seem like whenever you're, sorry, I'm kind of mentally fried right now. I've been reading all day, but
it's all good, man. I was going to ask you about modern dating. Barry just sent in $5. I want to address.
I can weigh in on that.
Seems like a common problem for people my age. Why do you think boomers rave about their grandchildren online, but rarely actually help out?
Wish I had a good answer for that. Well, I mean, the boomer generation was raised with a lot of materialism, and they were raised that the, you know, traditional family values are oppressive and it's the man holding you down, you know, like right. My parents were like the hippie parents, and my mom certainly had this idea. So I don't know. It sucks though, because I think it's one of the major barriers to younger women having kids is that they do not have family support. They don't have their mothers there helping them when their babies are young. They don't have their sisters and their cousins nearby anymore. And we used to have this network of built-in support, and all the women were at home, right? All the women were home raising the kids together. For me, I was always alone. It was very isolating. It was very difficult. I'm at home alone with 5 kids. All my friends work. My mom works. My sister works. My stepmom works. You know, my mother-in-law, all the women work. All the women are at work all day, and I'm always home by myself. So if I ever did need help, there's nobody to help me. If I get sick, there's nobody who's going to come and help because they're all at work. So right. Women don't have this community of support anymore like we used to have, and it really sucks. It's a big reason why I think the birth rate's so low. I think it perpetuates that. Right.
No, I totally agree. And piggybacking on your response, Rachel, you know, the boomer generation was the first one with the television. Mm-hmm. And so, like you said, I think the propaganda, I think the general, you know, they have a sense of more material wealth than, you know, us millennials and Gen Z for sure. You know, we're going to be in an economic situation in this country that's much less feasible for the raising of a nuclear family and children, generally speaking. And so we're kind of behind the 8 ball. But I think one of the best things boomers or anybody older, I don't even mean to make it a generational thing, but anybody older who's changed their mind, you know, this is where a woman who is 44, 45, who's post-menopause, you know, telling young women, hey, don't be a career, you know, boss babe. Like maybe, you know, if you have that guy who's really loyal and you guys are 22, you like maybe you can still go to university. You could still even but get married. Focus on family. Focus on the things that are most important. You know, like when your life flashes before your eyes, you know, being a nurse or working at some law firm is not going to be what's most important. It's going to be your children. It's going to be your family. It's going to be your parents. It's going to be your friends, and focus on relations. And that's another thing that Orthodoxy is explicit about, is that your relationships in the world are the most invaluable things. And this is where we earn or lose our salvation, is how we treat people. How do we engage with people? And so this focus on your own pleasures is part and parcel of this narcissistic society we live in through social media, which feeds and perpetuates the woman who's always taking selfies, always focused on her own happiness. And you mentioned a lot of the women who are getting divorces will mention being bored, or not feeling like they're fully in love anymore. And I had a woman come up to me who watches stuff online that I know in person. She was like, I saw one of the things you were talking about with women, and I got to tell you, I've never met a woman who says they got a divorce because they were bored. I don't know where you're getting this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay.
I've actually got something about that.
Huh?
I've actually got something about that. So
go ahead.
So like I've mentioned before, I'm in law school. A distant cousin of mine, she's the only other lawyer in our family. And what was it? The story went, she was married to her husband, had a great big family, she's a partner at a big corporate firm. I was told she makes like, I think 1.2 million a year, something really high like that. And she actually personally knows Warren Buffett. I mean, she's like way up at the top, right? And she divorced her husband because pretty much she was bored of him. She thought she had outgrown him.
Yeah.
And there's a very big trend. It's impossible to deny it, that when women are pushed so hard to get maximum economic achievement, that they're going to have a hard time finding men, because women will always look for a man who can provide more than them, because that is the unspoken or spoken understanding that men are the ones who provide. When the woman provides, the balance is way out of alignment.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen it before, personally, or anecdotes, or just stories you read online. You've got a young couple and they're struggling, and how did it win? So when, they might be like neck and neck, or maybe the woman slightly starts to surpass. Well, all the man's authority, his opinions, they immediately go out the window, because the woman's going to come at him and say, well, I make all the money. I do this, I do that. Your income is not as important. In fact, you should be a stay-at-home father.
Right.
And that kind of marriage is going to last 5 years tops.
And it comes to the fact that women still want a man to uphold traditional values. Every woman still wants a man to be a provider and be a protector. And yet when they do surpass a man in the ability to provide, what do we see? They start to lose respect for them. They start to basically decide that, I can do it without you. I don't need you. And that's where in my conversation with the gentleman at church is, it's like they don't want the patriarchy. They don't want a husband. They don't want a man. But then, as he said, some of the nurses I know, it's like they're kind of stuck because they're already 38. It's not, they can't go to work. They have to go to work to pay for the lifestyle that they've created. And so now they're on a treadmill of misery because they don't want the job. They do want a man now. They're willing to find a man to have the babies. They're willing to compromise because they're running out of time, but yet they're not as attractive to those men, and time's running out and they can't not go to work. They have to go to work the next day.
Yes, exactly. And if you guys want to hear an insane example of what we're talking about. So there was a woman who was mad at me on Twitter because I said that once you have children, that is your job. If you don't work, or if you don't have kids, you're not married, you don't have kids, and you want to work, okay, I'm not going to fight you on that. But once you have children, that is your priority. I don't any longer really care all that much about what you want or what fulfills you or what makes you happy, or if you're bored. You have children. You brought them into the world, and it is your responsibility above everything else to raise them and take care of them. And this woman told me, I am a Christian, she said, that I am a Christian. And you guys might want to mute if you're like not talking and moving around. But this woman told me, I am a Christian, and God commands that I use my gifts in the world. So I work. And I said, what about your kids? And she said, my kids will understand because I will tell them that the Lord commands me to use my gifts to make the world better. And I said, well, what do you do for a living? You know what she said?
OnlyFans.
No.
Would not be surprised.
She's a early child care expert who takes care of children. And I went, wait, you drop your kids off at a daycare so that you can go take care of other people's children. Are you kidding me? So your kids are going to grow up thinking, my mom didn't think we were important enough for her to take care of us. She thought her gifts in the world were better used to help raise other people's children. This is the insanity that women will actually try to justify to me. And I'm like, how? How does this make sense for you to outsource raising your own children to take care of other people's children? You see this all the time with like teachers and stuff. It's like, why are we doing things this way? This system makes no sense. Why outsource the raising of your children? And women, please, if you're a woman and you're watching me and you're still not sure, understand this. 95% of all the time you will ever spend with your children is gone by the time they turn 18 and move out. That's it. So if you have spent 40 plus hours a week with other people's children instead of your own, you've lost your opportunity. It's gone. You're never going to get that time back. And you'll be lucky now if you see them on holidays. And that's it. That's your life.
Pretty much. If I could add something about my own personal life, my parents actually, I have to brag on them. They did a great job raising me. They really did, because I'm 23 years old. I was born in 2000, so a lot of these young people issues, I'm seeing them right in my face every day.
Well, yeah, you're in it.
And, right. And just to name a few examples, when I was in high school, I was in a friend group of about 4, 5, 6 guys. I was the only one who still had both of his parents that were married, and 2 of them. One lost both his parents to drugs, and the other one lost his mother to suicide. And they're all just, unfortunately, in a very dark place now. They're all 22, 23, 24. And I just see, the way society's going, how people are just, everybody's a mess. They don't talk about how much mental health is totally overlooked in a way, but it is not in another. But when people don't have a stable family unit, my mother was a stay-at-home mom for the majority of my upbringing from birth until 18. She only worked when I was like 4 years old, and then from 11 to about 12, and that was it. My father even was insisted on my mother staying at home because he understood the value of it. And he understood, that's how you maintain the home. She helps keep the peace when he's gone. He comes back and helps raise me. He's the one that is the breadwinner, the provider. And, as a kid, I saw that growing up, what a man and a woman should be, how a husband and a wife should conduct themselves. My father has an amazing work ethic. He literally will go to work with the flu. He works, he's a lineman. He works blue collar. It's no small task to go out there sick like that. And my mother always would try to nurture me and always try to make sure everything was taken care of and that I'm doing all right. And it just taught me what a model relationship should be like. And I realized, I had a great upbringing, but nobody around me really did. So God gave me something that I have to help spread around. It's almost like a duty for men like me that have this strong, healthy nuclear family to spread the strengths and the benefits of that to others who didn't get it. Right. There's a lot of people out there, they don't have a mother or they don't have a father. They may not have both, or they may have one or the other and they just absolutely despise them. And I mean, I know a lot of teenage boys on Discord and their parents are alcoholics or manipulative, abusive, etc. And
well, you notice that when you get older, Jet. So I'm sure you go into college. I noticed, at least for myself, I appreciated my parents, and I especially appreciated how my dad was so much more once I got older, and I could appreciate it. I could appreciate him working 12-hour shifts. I can appreciate when things, went south, or unexpected things where he lost the job or the business that he owned, and he had to then work in a factory, that he did all that. And now I'm an adult and I see my parents' lives from that perspective, and it's like, wow, I'm really thankful that they were the type of people they were, because that then allowed me fertile ground to become the person I am today. And when the first time I went to college, I remember hanging out with all the guys that I was with, and we were probably drinking, going to parties, and find out that only one other person came from like a nuclear family. Everybody else came from broken families.
Yep.
And it's like, what, really? Oh, I totally took for granted, like the neighborhood I lived in, my neighbors, like everybody had nuclear families, everybody was together. And then you get older, you're like, wow, that was the biggest privilege I ever had was that. It wasn't, the skin color or my gender or anything like that. It was the way my family lived and my parents.
Exactly. If Rachel wants to say something, go ahead. But
I was actually curious if Dr. Vagisil had an opinion on the patriarchy.
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt your stream of consciousness, but so when it comes, all right, so I'll try and keep it short. But like one of the things with patriarchy that there's the perspective from the guy's perspective, and then there's the women perspective, and what the media and all these other crazy feminists are selling to these women is that patriarchy is every time that they see a man on TV, it's always in like this oppressive, like, oh, if you trust the man, then he's going to break your heart or something like that, because it's also because of the hookup culture and all this other stuff. Men aren't conditioned to follow what the Bible says, which is, you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart. You do all this stuff. And then because so many guys, you're taught that your value comes from how many women you can sleep with. So many of these women are like, oh, this guy just wants to use me for sex. And then it's like when the guy tries to actually align himself with what the Bible says, then they're like, oh, he must be bluffing, blah, blah, blah. And then they also have this kind of messed up notion of how they should act as women. Because I've noticed here where I'm at, when I'm at like a bar or anywhere, these women, like they don't really work out. They respond to conversation with like put downs or something like that, trying to be very masculine. And then that also plays into their inability probably to find men that have those good qualities. And so that reinforces their negative view of the word patriarchy. And so it really comes down to, it is the men that dictate like how women see things. Like they also, women, when they see the marriage, like you said, so many don't have that, nuclear family to start with, because a lot of people, they, like you said, they grow up in broken families. And so when they don't have that image, they in the marriage, they're like, oh, does that mean that I have to cook and clean? It's almost like they don't understand that we as men, we enjoy like protecting women or like making them, feel safe or like doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like when we
Gives
open
us
the door
purpose.
when we open like the door for women, we're not like, oh my gosh, I feel so oppressed right now. What am I doing? Like, it's the same thing. Like women are taught, like, if you make a sandwich for men, it's like, no, the guy's going to be like, oh, thank you. This is like really nice. You're teaching me to reinforce my good behaviors. And it's like the feminists, they mess them up. They're like, no, you have to act like a complete dipshit to the guy. And then magically he's going to be like, wow, I really want this woman and I really want to pursue her and have sex with her. It's like, no, that's how you get men to like stay away from you or only like pursue you for just the purposes of sex. They don't teach the virtues in women because they teach women that using their sexuality is how they control men, because they're constantly trying to reinforce that men are going to control them, and it's a competition instead of teaching them that they're complementary. So
I just had a
conversation. A woman like that.
I just had a conversation with a woman about that. She's like, oh, I want, this traditional, man. And I was like, well, don't you think you're a bit argumentative? And this was somebody I was friends with. So I was like, you think that, you kind of argue about everything and you're so, loud with your opinion. You think that's what they're going to want? It kind of dawned on her. It's like, don't you see, like, and she agreed that she wasn't the most traditionally feminine girl. And I was like, well, don't you think that to get that traditionally masculine man that you keep saying men aren't anymore, don't you think you need to be like that traditional feminine girl? Like, isn't that the only way that energy is going to match? And she's like, well, yeah, but men just aren't the way they used to be, or men aren't the way. And it's like, well, women aren't the way they used to be either.
Yeah.
I dated a woman like that. Patrick's aware of her. And this is not just exclusive to secular women, even Christian women, Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, a lot of them cannot handle a man who is willing to put his foot down, willing to give boundaries.
Right.
And like Dr. Vagisil said, a lot of these women, they're just so used to being masculine, to being so overly aggressive. And they see this in their own mothers too, because I mean, we all have seen this firsthand multiple times, that the woman runs the house. She walks all over her husband. All he's good for is just the money he brings home, and that's it. Go watch the football game, you good for nothing. Your 9 to 5's over. I run this place. I mean, my ex is a great example of that. Whenever she was a Protestant, you know, I'm Orthodox, and we'd always talk just about theology. And it's kind of strange because she'd always go on and on about like, oh, I want this biblical relationship, and I want a man who can lead me and put me in my place. And then I tell her, oh, that's great. I can try that. So different things happen, you know. And I would just politely put my foot down. Like one time I don't remember what it was exactly. I think she wanted to like go study with a guy in a secluded area once, and she told me about it. I said, you're not going to do that. That's really suspicious. Like, I don't remember where it was, but it was tucked away somewhere, you know, like it's kind of weird. You don't do that. Why don't you study with him at a Starbucks or something? And she got kind of defensive about that. And then another time, well, honestly, a lot of different issues, actually, mostly theological, because I was able to deconstruct her Protestant mentality patiently and as Christ-like as I could. And unfortunately, it was all in one ear, out the other. But every time she'd come across something that she'd realized that maybe I wasn't the most educated on, and she'd immediately just jump on that. Well, what about this? What about that? Well, what about if this happens? Oh, well, that doesn't sound like how I was raised, blah, blah, blah. Just like a junkyard dog trying to get at my throat every time. And
typical woman prattle.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, Dr. Bad, still these women are so aggressive, even
Do you
within
think it's
a
just
Christian
that they're
paradigm.
competitive with you? Because I feel like that was like the urge that was kind of implanted in me when I was young that I had to overcome later in my 20s, was you don't even realize you're doing it, but this urge to like one up your man all the time and be competitive with him, and like, you know, see everything as like you have to prove that you're better than him, or you have to prove that like, see, I can be smart too, I can be tough, I can be cool, I can be like, I feel like a lot of women do that. And
yeah, it's a good point.
What you younger guys have to say about it, like in your relationships, what's been the thing that has broken up the relationship? Like what was the breaking point that made it not work for you guys?
Just toxic, competitive, way too masculine, would not submit, even though she said she wanted something biblical, something Christian. She liked everything about me, except I was trying to lead her into orthodoxy, and she didn't like that I'd put her in her place. So, and it's actually kind of funny. She dumped me, but I was actually going to dump her the day after because she said some atrocious things about me on her way out. You know, just a little immature, emotional rant about how I'm basically just a terrible person. And I was just sitting there kind of stonewalling it, just being stoic, thinking, you know, I need to dump this girl, but I'm not going to rise to this frantic, anxious state of mind she's in. So I'm just going to call her tomorrow and dump you. And then she dumps me right then and there. Oh, awesome. Thanks. But it's just women are.
I was going to say, I was talking with some guys at our men's group at church, and they were voicing some of their discontent with their exes. One, he was like, yeah, it didn't work out. We were together for like 4 years. She was a pagan. She practiced witchcraft. And I was like, well, that's probably part of the problem there. And my point to them was the same thing to the girl I was talking to, that you want this girl to submit and look up to you and allow you to fill your masculine role. Well, there's probably aspects of ourselves as men in every person that we can become more, so that the person wants to do that. Because, you know, the common critique is, oh, women don't submit. And then women say, well, I want a man that's worthy to submit too. And fair enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like we're telling women, you know, any man who hits you in the DMs, you have to say yes to and submit to him. You know, some men aren't necessarily on the right page, but all of us can do a better job of being more complimentary to somebody who would fulfill those traditional roles. And so I think for Jet, for you, like that's difficult. If you're 22 or 23 and you're in a relationship with another girl who's 20, 21, 22.
She was 19 and I was 21.
Yeah. So that's difficult to establish that traditional dynamic because you're going through school. It's not like you have your career. It's
Right.
not like you have your job. It's not like you have social status. It's not like you have the ability to demonstrate value in the same way. Meanwhile, she is constantly getting hit on, different opportunities.
Oh
And
yeah.
so not
She got
that I'm
hit on
against
constantly when I
yeah,
was out
but I'm
there.
not against I think the young relationships are great. If she was 19 and on the same page as you and you were 20, 21, like that's great if you guys are able to commit. But I think for the time we're in culture right now, that is so difficult to
Right.
establish that traditional dynamic with somebody that's relatively your same age in that circumstance because there's so
Right.
much uncertainty. And then as young men, you know, you go from senior in high school having all the social status to then now you're a freshman in college, you have no social status.
Right.
And you won't and now you're competing with actual men because it's
Right.
not like, oh well, I just have to compete with the guys at school. No, once you're in college, you're competing with the whole world. So
Right.
then now the women have opportunity to any man that they want.
Right. I'm technically competing with men who are 30, 35, 40 years old now for women that are my age. And
Right.
one thing I thought would be funny to mention to wrap up the topic of my ex-girlfriend, she is now, well, I dated her for 3 months and it was a very fast 3 months, ironically. It's because she's now engaged to a guy she dated for 3 months. And this guy's basically a carbon copy of me, except he's a Protestant. And it's weird because, you know, you can tell like, yeah, a traditional guy, a masculine man has left some kind of impact upon her, but she doesn't want everything that he has to offer. She didn't want everything I had to offer. She just liked the idea of me. And a lot of women, again, you know, secular, Christian, whatever they might be, they like the idea of this big masculine traditional man. But when they're actually face to face with it and they act out, and he very calmly and sternly says, "You're not going to do that. You're not allowed to violate that boundary." She just goes haywire and dumps him and finds someone who's basically a cucked version of him.
Right. Christopher, welcome, brother. What's your opinion on the topic today?
I'm kind of on the other side.
Yeah, perfect. Feel free to voice your opinion.
I just wanted to know, like, what's wrong with like letting your wife or your partner be, you know, be the breadwinner, so to speak. I don't even like using that term because it just like, I don't know. It kind of points to like a power struggle, and I just think that we all kind of, you know, like my wife's not like she's not any more like better than me, but she provides for me, and like I usually just stay home with the kids and you know do the. So I guess you could say like from your worldview, like the roles are switched. I just want to know like what's wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, that's a great opportunity. Rachel, do you want to go first? I mean, I have a lot to say on that, but
yeah. So I mean, I don't want to like get super personal and ask you anything you're not comfortable with, but like, are you guys are not Christian then, I would guess? Because just because you said you guys from your, I don't know if you meant
perspective. Yeah, it sounded like you're saying
I mean,
you got. Yeah, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, we don't really, we just kind of like, you know, we don't really practice anything. We just kind of believe in a God, but it's kind of just, we both believe in God, but it's not like, it's more like just like the universe. I don't, you know, yeah, I'm kind of like in the new age. Like I
Okay.
was raised Catholic, and so that's why I'm not in that anymore, because I just part of it was just like all this tyranny and like hypocrisy, and like I just saw how it was just like all about control and stuff. So I kind of left that, and I found that, you know, this in the new age, you're kind of free to define whatever it is you want.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how many kids?
2.
And are you guys going to have more?
Not unless she starts making more money.
Okay. So she's working right now and you stay home, right?
Yeah, like I mean, yeah, it's basically like the roles are just like switched. Like the quote unquote traditional roles are just they're switched. Like
Yeah.
she goes and she makes money, and I take care of the kids. I make sure the house
Yeah.
is up kept, and it
Do you?
works well for us. But
Mhm.
I want to know what's so bad about it.
Yeah. So I would be curious what you believe the purpose or role of masculinity and femininity is, because one thing without, again, I don't know your context, Christopher, and thank you so much for coming on and voicing your opinion.
Yeah.
I would say that providing and protecting and becoming a sort of somebody who's going out into the world to make something is sort of a masculine imperative. And I would be curious to know, and you can respond, how fulfilled you are with your life as somebody who's staying home and taking care of the children, which is a very important responsibility. So somebody has to do that. And if your wife isn't there, then obviously it's your duty to do so. So nobody is going to disparage you or think less of you. In regards to sexual gender dynamics, I would argue that women are much better at providing nurturement and emotional support for children than men, even though we did talk about
Yeah, but
the
what evidence do you have for that?
that women are built for children versus the rearing and raising of children compared to men.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I would.
More fit to take care of kids. I'm doing a great job at it.
Well, my first question would be, because I've had 5 children, how old are the kids?
3 and 5.
Okay. And when they were born, did your wife just have to go like right back to work?
Luckily we had some savings, so she was, we were both able to, she was able to take some time off. But yeah, she went to work 2 months after.
So she wasn't able to like nurse them?
Yeah, I mean, she would like pump and leave it at home. So
Okay. How does she feel about being separated from her kids all day? That doesn't bother her?
I mean, when she comes home, she's, it's like, when a man comes home, they're like all stressed and stuff, and sometimes she's stressed and just tired, but she's grateful that I'm there, like just making
Well,
sure
I'm
that
just
dinner.
saying from my perspective, I was super heartbroken being away from my kids all day, spending, I don't know how long a work day she has, but for me it was like a half-hour commute, an 8-hour work day, and then another half an hour commute. So at least 9 hours of the day I wasn't seeing the kids. So then when I got home, I'd see them for a couple hours and then it's already their bedtime. And for me, I never got, everybody around me was going, you'll get used to it. You'll get used to it. And I was like, I don't want to get used to it. I want to be home with my kids. I'm their mom. So I'm just wondering from her perspective, how she feels about spending only maybe 2 or 3 hours a day with them instead of the whole day.
I'm not sure. I mean, if she feels some type of way about it, she hasn't voiced it. I mean, it's been going on for the past 5 years, and I'm doing
Do you?
well. I mean, I'm doing well. She's doing well, and our relationship is fine. Like we go on a date like once a month. Like she, sometimes she brings flowers, and and I just make sure that she's fed and I, all that stuff.
She
So I
she
mean, I don't.
brings you flowers.
What told me was an anecdote. Like, I still don't see any evidence.
Well, I can only say from my perspective as a woman that if I had to work and be separated from my children so that my husband could be the one staying at home, I would be resentful of that because I would want to be the one at home. And certainly, if I was in the masculine role and bringing my husband flowers, that would
I would
shut
be embarrassed as a man.
so fast. I'd be dry as the Sahara. Sorry to be
Yeah.
frank with you, but that's just
Yeah, I
my
have to agree with that.
that's just my perspective.
If my woman brought me flowers, I would probably look at her and say, do you want to wear the pants? Is that what this is?"
She clearly is to some degree.
Like, I wear the pants, and I don't care. Like, what does it matter? Like, it's 2023.
So-
I don't know why guys are still so healthy keeping
Well, I
these.
think part of a man's identity and masculinity is tied to his skill set, and so it sounds like there is no skill set you offer to society to produce more than you consume. And so I would imagine, and you can voice your opinion, Christopher, but I can't imagine a man feeling totally satisfied by his wife being the main provider. Probably she makes the majority of decisions. You are at home doing whatever it is that you do for the children, which is, great. Somebody has to do that, but you say there's no evidence. You have an anecdotal example, and then I point out that the entire history of gender and sex dynamics, and that women are literally biologically engineered to nurture and support women. You say, well, what's the evidence? I mean, what's the evidence that a man that has no skill set that allows his wife to basically dominate? I would say that's maybe you guys have a different dynamic, and I wish you guys nothing but the best, but certainly for the majority of people that's not going to work. The majority of women wouldn't be attracted to that, and the majority of men that have a masculine imperative wouldn't want to be a part of that either.
But don't you think that we should like change like these sort of like outdated structures and let the
because
Why?
there's
Why does it matter if it's quote
they're
unquote
not-
outdated?
There's this thing
They're
called the
not
Lindy effect.
what?
Well, it's not structures. It's that women literally choose to do those things. It's not like there's this constant thing in the media where it's like, oh, the patriarchy and all this stuff, but it's literally what women are choosing to do. And then it's another just a quick comment about how he's obviously, Christopher, you've talked about how your wife says she brings you flowers and all this stuff, and I'm sure that that feels good and all that stuff. But one of the things that you learn eventually about women is that men and women don't communicate the same way. Women sub-communicate through their body language. So she might be like saying something with her words, but you also have to pay attention to her body language and see how she really feels about that stuff, as well as, we as men, we have to be able to have that element of protection when it comes to women. Because if you've been on dates with women, there's nothing worse than a woman asking you like, oh, where do you want to eat? Oh, I don't know. Where do you want to eat? And then just being really indecisive or like making the girl constantly make decisions can be like something very irritating to them.
One that decides, and I don't have a problem with that. Like, it makes my life a whole lot easier, to be honest.
Does it really?
She's not.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm just trying to get at is that, like I said, women, like you as a man, like if you're frustrated with something, we as men will be like, well, I don't really like that. Let's do this. When women when they have a disagreement with something, they don't say it directly. They say it through their body language or like the way that they look at you, or like it's more subtle. So you might think on the outside. Yeah.
When I think
I've got a question. If you don't mind. Christopher, what do you bring to your relationship that your wife cannot provide?
That my wife can't provide?
Yeah, what is something you have that she could never do for your relationship or for your children?
Let me think about that. What can I bring that she can't?
Yeah, what is something unique to you that she cannot replicate?
I don't know, like good sex. Like sometimes I take them out, like when doing it, like sometimes like I'll kind of slap her a little bit, like hard, but she kind of
now he's trolling.
Yeah,
this is a troll.
And I would love to answer Barry's question.
All right, brother. Well, we appreciate your troll. Have a wonderful day, man.
Get her some badges.
I don't even believe that he's married and has 2 kids.
No, I don't either.
I think
he's. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, a lot of trolls these days are very low effort, but that guy actually was a little better than most.
Yeah, at least he came up with some kind of phony backstory. Because I was just like, wait, how did this
He's in
work?
the new
Once
age.
he said his wife brought flowers, I figured it was a troll.
Yeah, I thought this guy was either a cuck or a troll when that happened.
Well, yeah. But he's probably from it because I'm streaming to that old New Age channel I had that promoted psychedelics. So I'm sure he's from that, and he was he wanted to voice an opinion of opposition, but had no real argument. So, but Barry
change stuff just because change. We should just change the way we've done everything forever, just because it's old.
Pretty much.
So better, like.
It's outdated.
Hold on, Barry here. He made a comment that he lived the dynamic that Christopher was trolling about, where him and his wife, unfortunately, she had a remote job that paid, or she had a job that paid more than his remote job, or some of the sort. He said, as a guy who was in the situation of raising the kids while wife went to work, it sucks. Her remote job paid more at the time. Now that is switched, and it's a million times better for family life. And so then
I'm
he put in
sure.
here, same gentleman, shout out to Barry, throws in $5. He says, men traditionally make the money, where women usually managing finances and investments or given a household budget.
So that one I can answer. If you look at, you can take your pick of, medieval Russia or even medieval Pomerania, which was another place I did some research in. Men, traditionally were focused on maximizing their earnings of whatever they're doing, the work they're doing, the farm they're running, or the business or merchant trade stuff that they're involved in. Women actually were the ones managing finances. And even like real estate investments. So like if you can pick up the Domus Troy, for example, and a woman was expected to be able to manage the money of the household, and so that her husband could focus on maximizing the amount of income that the household would have to work with. You can even see this in towards the ends of Proverbs 31. We have the description of the woman who's she's running cottage industry inside their own house. She is managing investments, buying, selling, etc. That is how medieval society worked, and part of that is because when you look at how much men had to work, so it is true that you look at Christian medieval society, men overall work way less than they do today. Like the work year was closer to 12 weeks than the number of weeks that we work now.
Right.
But a lot of that free time was spent building those giant beautiful cathedrals you see everywhere,
Right.
building these glorious works of
Bridges,
infrastructure and art.
roads. Oh yeah.
Yeah, hey, I don't mean to cut you off. I just letting you guys know I gotta get going, but
All right, later,
I'll
Jen.
keep listening. But yeah,
All
hey,
right,
thanks
God
for
bless,
having
bro.
me. Yeah,
God
God
bless.
bless you all. Please pray for me. Bye bye.
Will do.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, but there was a lot of expectation in medieval society of what a woman, and even ancient society, of the ancient of the Middle East, of how much a woman could do in terms of the mathematics of the finances and running a household. And it's kind of fascinating reading how, like, because given that, like, when men worked, they were working like 14 hours throughout the day. Like, the woman had to be able to do the finances because the man literally had no time when those hard work hours were coming.
Right. Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that as Barry highlighted with his own life experience, maybe there's situations where unfortunately the woman makes more money and for a brief time that is the scenario. But as he highlighted and then said in the super chat, life and especially the family life was a lot better once he was able to make more money than his wife, and his wife could then switch roles and go back to the home. And I think men are going to feel more successful and more meaning by doing that. I just can't imagine not pursuing goals, like, and it's not that it's the sole basis of my identity, but like having goals, whether it be that week or the next 6 months, it could be fitness, could be business, could be life, could be whatever. Like, it gives me energy throughout my day, throughout my life, just trying to think about different goals that I set and then accomplish those. And if you don't, and your day is just waking up and dealing with the day-to-day of whether it be children or you're just a stay-at-home something, not that obviously somebody has to do that, but it seems like that would not be fulfilling. If you are a man and you're sort of rooted in your masculinity, I can't imagine that feeling being that feeling like a sort of fulfillment.
I can't imagine as a mother being separated from my children all day long so that my husband can stay home. Like, I'm sorry, I don't see, like, for me personally, it would build resentment because I have a pretty strong maternal instinct. I have a really strong bond and connection with my kids. And there's no way I want to be physically separated from them for most of their waking lives. Like, that would be incredibly painful for me, to be honest. And I think what we do nowadays is like beat that instinct out of women and tell them to ignore it and tell them that they don't need it and that they'll get used to their new like career life separated from their kids. And it's like, no wonder we see like kids having ADHD and anxiety and all these different issues that we didn't see in kids prior to 1970. we just didn't see it as much. So
Right.
I mean, this is the thing when people think that men and women, you can just swap them out. Well, we have technology now,
like
so it doesn't
gadgets.
matter. People can do either one. It's like, first of all, so I've been through 5 pregnancies, and I did have to work through most of them, and it was not fun for me, and it was exhausting and stressful and made everything worse, and it was not even good for my health. And then postpartum, when I had to go back to work with my older kids, thankfully, of course, later with the younger ones, Andrew and I were married, and he made it so I could stay home. And I had terrible postpartum depression with the first 2, and I did not have it with the younger ones. And I think it's because I was able to nurse like I'm supposed. Like breastfeeding is its whole own thing, you guys. It's like a full-time thing. There's so many hormones involved. There's just so much to it. And to take a lactating mother of a newborn and just shove her into a cubicle and tell her this is your new normal, you'll get used to it, I think is actually cruel. I think it's mean. I think it's unnatural. And I think it's extremely detrimental to both the mother and the baby's health and development. Like, I just have really strong feelings about that, if you guys couldn't tell.
Right. Well, Wicked Wally, a Crucible regular, throws in one of his dad jokes here. So shout out to Wicked Wally. God bless you, brother.
Hey,
Thanks
Wally.
for the support. He says, did you hear about the chiropractor who married a track and field star? They met when she threw her disc out. Wally. Wicked Wally.
Oh,
Another
Wally.
day, another joke. But thank you so much, brother, for throwing that out there. Do appreciate the support. And Alt Monarchist throws in 555. It says, my fiance is a little older than me. We are both Orthodox. I have peace in my soul when we are together, and she supports patriarchy. Well, that's great. You know, and I know people, many Orthodox couples that, you know, the age, the woman's a little bit older. That's okay. As long as, I think the most important things is vision for the future, value, of goals and values religiously, and family structure. If she can be older, want children, and still expect you to go out there and be the man, and I think that's totally fine. So God bless you, Alt Monarchist, for you and your wife. Chase Haggard also threw in a few bucks and says, came late but great stream, y'all. Much love to DPH and Rachel. Shout out to
Thank
Chase
you,
Haggard.
Chase.
Love you, brother. And BMX 1966 says, great to see our sister Rachel. Thank you, DPH. Well, thank you, BMX 1966.
Thank you, BMX. You're so kind. Patrick's chat is very nice to me. I appreciate you guys. You guys are always so cool.
Yes, I like to think my chat is very respectful. I like to keep it that way. But,
you know, that's another. Now that I think of it, that's another thing about patriarchy is like, when women don't have a patriarchy, we don't really get to be mothers. I mean, think about what motherhood is anymore. We've turned it into this part-time nights and weekends thing where, you know, your primary imperative in life is your job and your career. And women are perfectly happy, by the way, to submit to their boss. You know, if their boss says, thanks for your input, Linda, but we're going to do things this way. They might get a little miffed, but they're going to go along with it, and they're going to submit because they want to keep their job and they want to, you know, move up in the company or whatever it is. If a woman gets pulled over by a cop and gets a ticket, I mean, unless she's one of the few crazy people that you'll see in like a viral video, normally the woman's going to submit to the cop. She's going to submit to the court. She submits to the authority of the IRS, of the traffic laws. Women will submit to the authority of anyone except a husband because they've been sold this baloney idea that it's a partnership. It's an equal partnership. And I get told this all the time. Women will be like, I'm very happy with my marriage. We have an equal partnership. And it's like, first of all, I doubt that. If you really got into it with them, I bet they don't. But second of all, the women who tell me they have an equal partnership are usually the ones who also say they're no longer attracted to their husband. They maybe sleep together a handful of times a year. They, you know, put him down in front of people, make jokes about the guy. You know what I mean? So it's like, no thanks. I think you can keep your egalitarian utopia because it doesn't sound like a good time to me. But
well, you nailed something I want to put down is it was ultimate authority, right, in regards to a patriarchal system. And so it's so interesting, you know, as the meme goes, the woman won't make her husband a sandwich, but then she goes to work at Subway, and then she's making all these other people sandwiches.
Right.
And so I think a real question in regards to looking at patriarchy, matriarchy, or these various societal organizations is what is and who has ultimate authority. And when you look at then the nuclear family, if you are in a patriarchal tradition, it's going to be the husband. And it's not that he dominates his wife or suppresses, as you've highlighted 1,000 times, Rachel.
Yeah.
It's that he's shouldering the responsibility. That's different. Maybe it's subtle to most people, but it's a world of difference.
It is.
You have just as much of an opinion, thoughts about things, but your husband has the authority when it comes down to it. And then we look at society, and you see this sort of exporting of authority to the state, to the government, to making the government the husband. We can look back to welfare systems, 1964, and what that's done to the Black community. Nuclear family is where all this stuff starts. And I think, again, show me a patriarchal system that has great nuclear families. You won't, because when you look into ancient matriarchal systems, they have full moon orgies. The men don't know paternity. They don't know which children are theirs, and they have to raise the children collectively. And that's, you see this rhetoric and this mantra about, oh, the children are the communities. The community raises the children, this leftist propaganda that is directly antagonistic to the nuclear family. Because, again, going back through the Bible, the patriarchy, biblical patriarchy, is that men want to know the children they have, and their progeny is important to them, and raising them in their value structure is important. And there comes a sense of responsibility, but then the reverse of that is showing respect and giving authority to the men.
Yeah, this was intentional. If you go back and read the writings of the Bolsheviks, especially their premier feminist, Alexandra Kollontai, she wrote at length about the fact that the specific reason they wanted to eliminate marriage, which, by the way, you guys, Bolshevik Russia was the very first place to have no-fault divorce, to remove marriage as a sacrament from the church and make it a flimsy license that you get from the state. That's where that happened first. And they had the idea of this communal raising of children in daycares that were called creches. It was this communal system, and they had to get rid of it because the amount of abuse was astronomical. The birth rate went down, and Stalin came in and realized, we're going to get wiped out. They had that, and then they also had made abortion legal and free in state hospitals with no questions asked, and they had 3 abortions for every 1 live birth within a decade of that happening. So when Stalin came to power, he had to get rid of all these policies, not because he cared so much about the patriarchy necessarily, but because he was like, China or Europe's going to wipe us out. Like, we won't have a country anymore if we keep doing this. So
same with us.
But these people want that. They want to break all that down. They're anti-human, and they don't want you having babies, and they don't want you having prosperity, and they want your allegiance to be to an internationalist global power.
Right.
So I got to be heading to dinner soon, but the last thing I just want to mention briefly is about how when people talk about, restoring patriarchy, etc., like when you look at patriarchal societies, the fact is men are raised to be fathers, and father is, patriarchy and monarchy are tied together, and they're tied at the hip. God is father, and God is king, and the very first step, like if a man wants to rule, if a man expects or wants to have kingship of his family, it begins with learning to rule oneself. And the fact is, I can tell this from my own marriage. The more a man rules himself, the easier and easier and easier it becomes for your woman to just slide into that feminine role. And I know I've seen the opposite happen too, where a woman embraces femininity and her man starts becoming more masculine, but it's more common to see it the other way.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, you can see this even at the geopolitical level. It was, of all people, it was Andrei Martyanov who actually had a very good critique on why is it that the American system produces absolutely no statesmen. So even like when people look at you look at like alternative politics within the United States, even among whether you look at the progressive left or the alt-right, the fact is they don't produce statesmen, and the reason is because you don't have anyone that's raised from their youth in order to in the art of rule. And you look at traditional societies, you can take the medieval period, or you can even take modern period. Like if you look at China or Russia, even the fact is they do produce statesmen. People can disagree with the ideologies or how those societies function, but the fact is they do produce men who are trained how to rule, and that's something
Yeah.
that simply does not happen anywhere in the West.
That's a very good point, and I love what you
Very good.
said about when men embrace their masculine role. It puts the woman at ease and makes her feel safe and secure enough to be able to really fully embrace that feminine role. That was my main resistance. I had a dad who was like literally browbeaten into the ground by my mother and subsequent wives, and was always taught that I had to be like, in charge of things and running stuff because I couldn't trust anyone. And that was a big like hurdle for me to overcome. And being married to a ultra masculine guy like Andrew kind of fixed that for me. So
Yeah.
And just to follow up on that comment that someone had made about learning to rule, if you look at, so I went to both Catholic schools and fundamentalist schools in the U.S., and you have this movement within the fundamentalist movements of like Quiverful, etc. And so they have this attempt to try to reconstruct an aping of patriarchy in the past. But one thing that is very common that I've seen up front is the men in question who are doing this, they don't know how to rule themselves. And that comes down to the religious question of like the fact is Protestantism does not have a system for men to fight and defeat sin in their own lives, especially habitual sins, sexual sins, etc. And Orthodoxy has that. And I've seen it myself, like people I know who are children of people who converted to Orthodoxy who are American, and their women are their daughters are much more feminine, approaching the level of femininity I've seen in like Russian and Serbian women, and their men are much more masculine. It really is like that. I put that down as like that's I mean, of course the number one treasure is the faith itself. Like that is the pearl of great price that you want to hand down to your children. But one of the nice side benefits of that pearl of great price is the fact that your women are your daughters will be raised in a space where they can be feminine, and it's something that is praised, and it's something that's modeled. You have the greatest of all saints, the Theotokos, right there, on the left of the iconostasis. And for men, a place where they can be masculine and be masculine without being torn down for it or attacked for it, etc. And it's interesting where it's because I've talked to people, I've talked to people who from Russia, visiting the States, etc. And they said they heard that in Orthodox Church is the only place a man in America can be a man and not be considered a threat or hated by society. And they didn't believe it until they came here. So,
yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. And now, even in Orthodoxy, I'll do a stream tomorrow addressing a couple hit pieces on me, even within Orthodoxy. They're like trying to make it where promoting traditional masculinity is some type of like punishable offense.
They
It's
think
ridiculous.
femininity. These people, I know exactly who you're talking about. This little group of ankle biters. They think femininity and pacifism are these great virtues, and they're not. And I can tell you that they're not, as somebody who has been the victim of a bad man before. There is nothing better in this world than seeing like really great men who are virtuous and like Jose was saying, in control of themselves. They are like, I've said this before, you guys. I know I'm always talking about my husband, probably to the point that everyone's tired of it, but he is in full control of his emotions. Like he is just very much in command. It's not that he doesn't have feelings. He definitely has feelings, but he is in total control of them. And his family coat of arms says, he who rules himself rules the world, or something like that. So he's always had this mentality of like, I need to first and foremost be in command of my emotions, be in control of myself, and be in full command of the weapon that I am as a man in this world. And there's other men I know in my life who are this way, who are these like masculine men striving toward greatness, and they're inspiring and they are amazing, and they make living in the world worth something, in my opinion. I don't want to live in a world where, I know that guy was trolling, but imagine a world full of Christophers, men who are just like, oh, I wish my wife would go to work so I could just sit on the couch. Like, that's what I would just want, a woman who will take care of me so I don't have to do anything. Women don't really want that. And that, by the way, is not a world of goodness, that's going to be a world of evil. That's going to be a nightmare. That's going to be horrible for everybody. We need masculine men who are going to hold the fort down.
Right. Yeah.
I got to go. So thank you very much.
Hey, well,
and I look forward to that stream tomorrow on you're covering those hit pieces. So if you're getting hit
yeah.
pieces, you're over the target.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. But God bless you and the family, man. I hope you guys are doing well.
Thank you, and we're praying for you too. How much longer till you're hitched?
Well, that's it. We'll figure that one out. My fiance just got here. Yeah. So,
all right. You're in
we're in the process.
You and the fiance are in my prayers, so don't worry.
Yeah.
Ciao,
Thanks, man. God bless. You know, Adam Simon, welcome, brother. Didn't know if you have a point you would like to address right off the bat. I was going to bring up what's going on with Logan Paul and tie that back into the patriarchy versus matriarchy and modern dating. But unless Adam Simon, you had something you wanted to say before we go on to that topic. You're muted, by the way. Okay.
Yeah, we can do that topic. That sounds great.
Okay. So I don't know, Rachel, if you saw what's going on with Dylan Dennis and some of the stuff going on with Logan Paul and his now fiance, basically being exposed to be, let's just say she got around Hollywood circles. And
she's a 304.
Yeah, and she is, as most people would claim, the alpha widow from Leonardo DiCaprio. That was sort of her claim to fame, is that for a brief period she was Leonardo DiCaprio's girlfriend. Now Logan Paul just put out this video about how she was not letting him sleep with her, which, okay, we're in favor of that, but non-premarital sex. But turns out she got around quite a bit before she got to Logan Paul. And he then got on a knee just, I think, a few months later and like proposed to her. And so now they're engaged and expected to get married. And the internet's kind of been set ablaze because Dylan Dennis, this guy who he's supposed to box, who's sort of a controversial figure in the MMA community, has posted all these photos of now Logan Paul's to-be wife and showed, I mean, it is ridiculously long how many people and how many public photos there are of her with different quote unquote celebrities. But I was going to throw that up to the patriarchy conversation and how does that relate or not relate? Curious what people's opinions are on that.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in real quick because it's like 3 a.m. here and I'm about to go to sleep. But
okay,
just really quick. Yeah, just with regard to the whole Logan Paul situation, actually, it's funny because he was making fun of George Janko, who's one of the Christian guys who used to be on his podcast,
right.
And then, talking smack about him. And now he doesn't realize what marriage is. And so he's jumping. He's like, he sees marriage as like, oh, I'm going to get down on my knees. And then this like pretty girl, we're going to live forever. And then it's like, well, guess what, buddy? You're going to like have a very rude awakening because you didn't vet her. That's the number one problem, is that we as guys, if you're thinking with your little head and not your big head, you're like, oh, she's hot. And it's like, well, okay, well, like, what are you going to do after like the 5 minutes you're with her in bed? It's like, is she able to raise your kids? Like, is she mean? Does she edify you? Does she have all the fruits of this stuff? It's like, no. Well, I mean, obviously I can't speak to her character, but like the fact that she's been around so many guys, it's not conducive to her being a good mom or any of that stuff. And then what's even worse is that Logan Paul, I'm sure he went to public school, and one of the issues with public school is that they don't teach you any skills as a man. And so what happens is like he found his identity in YouTubing and all this other stuff because he didn't get any validation, because he didn't learn any skills to do things and be self-reliant. And so he's become reliant on attention and other people's opinion of him, and he constantly has to appeal to that, and then that's not very masculine. So he's actually starting from two different, like, not very masculine places of not understanding marriage, as well as not having that self-confidence that comes from God instead of his appearance or what all the views on his channel and all that stuff. So it's from a false base, and he's also setting himself.
The problem with the Paul brothers is that they are basically both occultists. Okay, like they've both talked about like Jake Paul has talked a lot about how he learned to practice manifesting his desires
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard of
And
this.
he's
I
talked a
don't follow him
lot
too
about
closely. Yeah.
some witchy. He's had like some very witchy, occulty symbolism on his Instagram. Like he had a black and white circle for a while, and he would talk about how he would write down what he wanted in his life and manifest it for himself, and like repeat mantras, and that he learned to protect his will. You can tell they've been reading, or that
Okay.
someone has influence. So
Right.
I think that's what's going on a little bit. And like Logan got, after he did the suicide forest debacle that didn't go well for him, he got very left. He got very left wingy. He got very social justicey. He began like, remember he was very pro Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. So if those things are the case, it makes sense that this would be the person that he's going to have this marriage with. Now, Jake has already done one sham marriage that was for social media purposes. He got married once already for like as a stunt. And I'm not super sure that Logan Paul and this girl aren't doing that, because she's very trolly. She's very
Okay.
much like a troll, and so is he. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of like, I kind of doubt that he's actually as sincere about all of this as he says. Maybe I'm just skeptical, but that's kind of my reading on it. I'm kind of like, meh. And they're the kind of people that they'll get divorced and they won't care anyway, and they'll just be back with someone else the next day. And
Right.
she probably won't have kids because she has to stay hot, and she doesn't want to ruin her body and all this other stuff. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what they do, but.
Well, she's already done like nude stuff, because that was the big thing. Dylan Dennis like posted photos of her bare breasts because she's already done that.
Yeah.
And it's already out on the internet. But I don't follow the Paul brothers too much, other than the brief boxing match that I may see. So I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're trolling either. I want to say welcome, Nada. It's good to see you. Hope you're doing well.
Thanks for coming on, Nada.
Hey guys, great talk. I just had a couple of things I wanted to add to the conversation, but
Sure.
I
Go wherever you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that of course Rachel's got a lot of this stuff covered, and both of you and everything. Obviously, we're all Orthodox, but I just wanted to add that why this whole term of patriarchy, this idea that this is extended to anyone who is a male is something that has been obviously misconstrued, misunderstood, and somehow there's this resentment. So I understand if women have resentment to the dude who, is like, sitting around and basically being pretty femme and doing and acting as a woman does, and doing things the way women do, and waiting, and are perfectly comfortable with a woman bringing home the bacon, et cetera, as they say in the West, in the U.S. I'm trying to think in my English mind right now.
We appreciate that colloquium.
Yeah. So I could see some of those resentments and how that would, and then them thinking I should be subservient or respectful of that. Obviously, we're not talking about the greater aspect of men in the world, the patriarchal societies in the world, everything else, but not every society that's patriarchal is the same. And obviously, when we're speaking about Eastern Orthodoxy, for us, that's where that even comes from, is obviously our patriarchs. And a patriarch is a leader, a father of a tribe or a family or a household, right? And so he's the leader. And so he's a father. So we have to make sure that they know, like, we're not saying some dude who's like on whatever social media or doing something and like, woman,
don't speak to me, woman, you are beneath me.
It's like, exactly. It's like, you are not part of that. And I have no problem with showing great respect, but in those regards, they're not part of that. And it's not that they can't be, it's just they're not at this point in time. And that's a position that is to be revered and honored, and not to just be given to great swaths of people just in general because they happen to be male. Just as I call women, if they're not all women, I don't give them that honor. Some are female and some I call she creatures. They're different, but they're a different variety, right? But in general, I'm not going to give everybody the honor of being called a woman and referring to them as my equal. Or, I've had, just like obviously Rachel, as I've had the quote unquote the she creature crowd of being like, oh, you're not blah blah blah. And I make it very clear to them, you are not my sister. You are my inferiors. I assure you. You are inferior to me in so many ways. So we are not sisters, you know? And so they're like, oh, all shocked. Now there's hope for you. Maybe you can be, you know, rehabilitated. And sometimes they pull back and they change their mind. They look at things differently. But yeah, the problem is that, like, we're not saying that, okay, the patriarchy of the FLDS church, respect the patriarchy.
Yes.
We're not saying the patriarchy of the patriarchal society, which is completely false anyway, in a Muslim society, which they don't even really, they borrowed that from us Orthodox, because Allah is neither male nor female and is LGBTQ plus compliant. You know, it's not a male female, and Allah was called a she and as much as a he. For eons until the recent centuries. So that's not that. So the one flesh, and that's why when we have our crowning ceremony in Orthodoxy, we become one flesh. We become the king and queen of our domicile, of our household, and we are there together to work in concert, to become one in mind and heart. And it's not even, that's why in like being Serbian and looking at this stuff, to me it's so foreign in so many ways, because it's not even a thought. It's not that women aren't, they're not strong as far as helping or doing what they need to do within the household, or sometimes you get those she creatures are like, what about blah, blah, blah? There's that one soldier, the Serbian soldier, the Milunka Savic. I'm like, I know about her, but guess what? Milunka, this was World War. There's times where women in Serbia over the centuries have had to do what they have to do and even pick up arms to defend their home and do what they have to do. But even Milunka Savic, as wonderful she was, and she did that as a sacrifice, not because she wanted to do something guys did or looking for equality. She did it because to avoid slaughter of her family. Her brother was a little younger than her, and her father already went off to war, more than likely dead, and somebody needed to be there to carry on the family name and to protect the mother and the sisters, the little sisters. So Milunka, being an excellent at handling artillery and everything else, she binded, she did what she had to do to get in there. In the end, she ended up becoming, one of the most awarded females, I guess, in history, as far as military history. But guess what she did? When it was done, she got married. She had kids. And she was very happy to be a woman. And that's how it is when it comes down to it. The problem I see, like in Serbia over the centuries, you've had that with women. We've done what we had to do. We've come in there. We've helped out where we had to. But when that's done, we're like, oh, they're back. We're done. Yeah. The problem in the West I saw with the whole, Rose the Riveter BS, the entire fable.
Rosie the Riveter,
is that they're like, they forgot that now they were like, yay, let me go back to what I need to do. Isn't that great? Now I can go back to my children. I can go back to my life. And one more thing, I don't want to be so long-winded, but the big thing that I kind of see, well, first of all, there's a saying in Serbia, and it basically goes like, the man is the head and the woman is the neck. They have to work together. There is no it's not about I'm dominating you. That goes without saying. That's the man. He's the head of the household. There's no question. Nobody's questioning that. For instance, in Serbia, nobody's saying I want to be the head of the household. But in the West, it's like they're battling over that, and that's very odd. Or I want this equality, and that's not even a question. Nobody even talks about that. You know why? Because being the head of the household, being the patriarch of the house, a lot of responsibility. You have to. This is a point of honor, of nobility, to take on that role. This is not just like some any dude going like, what are some of those shows, Fresh and Fit, going like, yeah, lady, you're not the patriarchy. I refuse to include them in that. What happened with feminism, obviously Rachel knows, is that they're still following men. They just chose to follow wicked men instead of the good men.
Great. Yep. Exactly. Well, and what you're talking about, Nada, in regards to the complementary understanding of male and female, or the neck and the head. It's because the West is so wrapped up through the academy, the propaganda has forced people to think in power dynamics, and everything is a conflict. And so like this Marxist understanding of everything, it's like it's seeped into every aspect of our culture. Whereas your Serbian culture, they actually had to deal with aspects of that, and they've maintained a sort of better grasp on reality. The West, because of its fruits and its luxuries, they don't even live in reality, and therefore they can get all upset about these theoretics.
We rose in admiration, respect for our men by seeing that, because in World War I, half almost half of the Serbian male population was lost. And
Yeah.
so after that, we elevated in our respect and admiration. And in the West, after the war, they elevated in their disgust and resentment.
Mhm.
And that's what's so odd to me. And that's the other thing I know in the West is a saying, which we have a similar in Serbian, but this is very not a very normal saying in the West, is the man behind the woman behind the man, right?
Right.
In Serbia, that's something that we find, we almost brag about. Look at my man, look at him, look at my husband, and where he is, and we are proud. Some are maybe a little too proud, but like we are proud and this and that. That's like, don't take away my honorable position, that I'm there to help and guide and do what I can do behind the scenes to make this make him, help him to have him achieve his maximum. That's a beautiful position and role to be in.
That's how
it's not
I
always easy.
feel. That's exactly how I feel. And I absolutely, like, watching Andrew over the course of our marriage turn into, like, when we were young and we got together, I knew that he really had something. I knew there was something great about him. See, look, he just brought me this drink, everybody. So take that, haters.
Yeah.
How do you like them apples?
Oh my gosh, he
Equality.
opens the fridge. What a cuck.
I know.
So small-minded, and the idea is like to think that like your husband would never hand you a drink. That if you were on the floor really sick, he'd be like, "Better call somebody, bitch."
Yeah, you better do
exactly.
something. I'm not getting down there. No, they're so silly. But when we got together, the reason I wanted to be with him is because I saw this crazy potential in him. I knew he was really smart. I saw him doing virtuous things that were uncommon for the men in our culture that I was around at the time. And I saw things in him that I was like, I think he has like greatness potential. And I remember telling his sister that and her like laughing at me and thinking that was absurd and silly. And she told me he was never going to be anything. And because, it's the typical woman thing. It's this typical, like, oh, he ain't shit, that kind of attitude. And they thought I was.
Everybody loves Raymond, that kind of thing. Oh, idiot.
Yes, exactly that.
Exactly.
And like to watch what he's been able to do over the course of the time we've been together, the amazing person that he's become. And like, I'm so proud to be this man's wife. And now I'm always like hoping he doesn't figure. I always feel like I'm getting away with something. Like, is he going to figure out that I'm like totally punching above my weight here? Like, in other words, I feel like I made a really great call and that it's worked out really well for me. And I'm super, super thankful. And to your point, Nat, I'm so glad you brought this up, because the little people on Twitter with frog avatars or with anime avatars will tell me that because they're an 18-year-old boy that they can tell me to shut up and go back in the kitchen and whatever. And I'm like, no. If you want patriarchy, you have to be a patriarch. That's the thing I said that made the most right-wing people mad. Was I said, if you want patriarchy, we need patriarchs. We need that first. Okay. Yeah. So
agree 100%.
This idea, and it was never this way in a patriarchal culture, that a woman like me, that I'm about to be a grandma in the next few years. I'm 43. I've raised 3 children to adulthood already. I would have still had a position of authority over, say, a 16 or 18-year-old boy. I would have been like the church lady you're supposed to treat with respect and maybe like listen to some of her wisdom. You never saw 18-year-old boys bossing around 43-year-old babushkas or something like that. That's not how that works.
And in my and in being Serbian or an Orthodox culture, you don't call like even if he's like, when I'm in church, and even if they're like teenagers, 16, 17 years old, and I'm 20 years older than them, they're going to talk to me. They're going to call me Teta Nada, Aunt Nada. Point of respect. You call aunts and uncles. Those are your elders, and that's how you speak to them. Not in that way. But yeah, exactly. Somebody on wherever.
I was gonna ask you in regards to, just so you can continue that point. I mean, don't you think that value system, as Rachel and I were talking earlier, that the young boys would refer to you with respect, that respect permeating culture is tied to a patriarchal system. And so without the patriarchy, the young boys don't show you the proper respect that they should.
Exactly.
Yes.
so you have that, and so when you have that, that's why I just wanted to make the distinction, is like, you're just being male doesn't make you part of the quote unquote patriarchy or the bizarro world patriarchy they have here in the West. You're not part of the patriarchy. You're not part of that. I don't. When I say I love the patriarchy, which I've been doing for years, and I do for years, from my childhood, from my from the with my father, my church, it's I love them. I love that point. Not just, oh, you're a male and whatever, and what feminism is battling against. No, not that.
Right.
Not that. That's not
Right.
what I love. So I don't want to put them in the same thing. And the other thing is that, like, women oftentimes they say, oh, men this, men that, men that. It doesn't really come up in, like I said, in Serbia, where but in the West, this is a big thing. Men that, or the way you're taught, or who knows how you were raised, or your father. I'm like, first of all, I just want you. I tell them, like, my father is, obviously he's pretty amazing. He's an aerospace engineer, but he also was a boxer, a welterweight boxer when he was in the army, and very, and can basically build anything with his hands, whatever you want, a gazebo, a this, whatever you want him to do. And so he's pretty amazing. And I was always with him and doing and building and working on stuff with him. I was always with my dad constantly. And then I would watch some stuff with him, even if I wasn't interested in it. And there was boxing. Now, if there was men boxing, I would be like, okay, I'd watch a good match. But I'm a teen. And when there was women's boxing came on, and my dad was watching it, and I was like, oh, call me when the men come on. And my dad's like, no, you have to see this girl. She is good. Look at her. She is blah, blah, blah. And then look at her skills. He's the one that got me to even think about watching women's sports, which I never wanted to do before. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, any guy can be big and not good. But look, because he always liked the welterweights and everything else like that. And he's like, look at the skills she has to use, and look at how she's. And I'm like, okay. So it's in the same thing with all these other sports. It's men that are watching women's Zhenski football, women's soccer, right? It's men that are even watching that or getting into it. It's not women. It's men. And so if it's men teaching them to look into that, right? So it's like, talk about shooting yourself in the foot, right?
Same thing here in the US with like women's basketball. It's mostly like fathers and their daughters that watch women's basketball. And yet the whole thing is about how bad men are and that they need to be paid the same thing as NBA players. It's like,
right.
No.
It's like, it's also, honestly, it's like, the thing is, though, you have some women that they're getting there, they're almost there, but they don't think they're allowed. And so it's great, the work that Rachel does and everything else, and writing books and stuff like that, and letting them know, giving them almost the permission. But I do know there's a lot of she creatures that can be rehabilitated. I've seen it a couple of times. It has happened, and then they sit back, but oftentimes it comes through the church. It comes through, you come in there, and then all of a sudden you start to understand, and it comes through prayer. It comes through humility. It comes through it comes through submission to your husband, and then knowing that you both have to submit to one another. And that you both have to basically crucify your egos every day. And it's not always easy. It's not like it's a walk in the park, but it's a valiant effort and a wonderful pursuit. And it's a wonderful practice in our theosis of marriage. And the thing for me is, like, the woman behind the man, I just can't believe how that's been spit on as if some sort of you're this, you're that, you woman. And that's a point of honor. Yeah, it's a beautiful position. It's a beautiful.
Yeah, and I love what you said too. You said something a little while ago about, and I say this all the time too. When we talk about femininity, we are not talking about weakness. We are not saying that to be incapable, incompetent, and weak is to be feminine. Sometimes Andrew will get haters who are like, "Oh, your wife is masculine. She shoots guns and she debates men, and so you're actually a cuck or whatever." And he said to me the other day, he's like, I was thinking about it. He's like, yeah, you know what? Sometimes they say Andrew likes tough women. He's like, you know what? I kind of do. I like that my wife, if something happens and God forbid the guy takes me out first, my wife has a handgun and knows how to use it. I like that if my wife needs to lift a 50-pound sandbag or like say, lift the end of a car off of one of my kids or something, she can probably do it. Like, he's like, I like competent, capable women. That doesn't mean
Right.
I let them boss me around. Like there's a
Or
difference.
that's a necessary masculine. My fiance is incredibly feminine, slender, small girl. She likes guns. I showed her how to shoot
Yeah.
guns, handguns, rifles, and she likes going to the gym to stay fit and work out and be strong. Upper body too. It's not just, the
Yeah.
girls doing the lower body.
She's got
Full
some
body.
nice delts. She's got some very admirable delts, but she
Well,
has a beautiful, like, feminine shape to her. Nobody would ever look at her and say she's masculine. So people
Right.
just need to, like, understand that women can and should be strong. Motherhood is hard. It's physically hard. It's mentally hard. It's like it's a marathon of difficulty, and you can't be weak and be a good mother. So you should be strong as a woman. It just doesn't mean that you should be competing with men or competing with them for control or power or authority, because like we've been saying this whole stream, the men have by far the most responsibility. The survival of society depends on them, and they need to have the proper amount of authority that goes along with that, or everything crumbles, which is what we're
Right.
seeing right now.
Exactly. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, definitely both, but both sides have a. But the thing is, I always go back to our orthodoxy is that like it has to be this growing this the true definition of two becoming one. This is how you build. That's how we build. We become crowning ceremony, king and queen of our homes. We're building it, and that's why I also want guys to know. Oftentimes they hear, well, I don't have that much money. I don't have. You start. You don't need. Nobody has to come in with riches and jewels, but you have to find the right woman, the right person that sees the potential and knows that you're going to go somewhere with that. And then you better allow her to help you fulfill that potential. And so you guys have to work together. And so when you build it together, you value it so much more. You go, wow, like we did that. You could start off in a little apartment, and you could start off and people, let somebody gave you a couch, somebody did this, you guys bought a little table, you got a little this, and then the next thing you know, you go to the next level, and then you help the next couple, the next people that come along. But the thing is though, is for guys oftentimes, you can't, these women need to be rehabilitated, but they can't be rehabilitated. You want a virtuous woman, you got to be an honorable, noble man. You got to at least work
Yes.
on it. You got to try,
Yes.
you got to try. You can't be like, okay, I'm doing this, doing that. Like you got to let go of the hoe. You got to let go of the hoe addiction and move on and be the man you
Right.
need to be in order to pull that kind of woman and lead by example, right?
Exactly. That's always been my advice. If I do one-on-ones with anybody and they're talking about the inability to find a wife or that type of woman, is like you said, young men, especially if you're Orthodox, you need to become a patriarch, because that's the only way that you're going to get a woman to follow you, because the woman who's going to be interested once you are that is the woman who wants to submit and follow somebody and help you in that regard. And so there needs to be a real push for young men to realize, hey, you can't, just because you're Orthodox or you know theology or you have trad values doesn't mean some woman's going to come submit to you. That submission has to be earned to a certain degree. And if you become that man, you'll attract the right type of woman.
Indeed, I agree. Listen, you guys are great. I'll let you guys go and wrap up. And thank you for letting me hop on and chit chat.
Thanks
Always
for
great
coming
talking to
on,
you.
Nada. I
Yes.
don't get to talk to you that much, but I love it when I do.
It's nice when it's not a troll, right? When I'm like actually talking.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
people are like late. I'm gonna get people to be like, oh, I didn't even know that you had a non. That I was like, hey guys,
non-troll
I
persona.
disagree. What are you doing? That's crazy. Patriarchy is bad. They're gonna kill us, and I can't get 1 million abortions. I'm so sad. So it's gotta be
Exactly.
interesting for them to see there's another side to me. Take it easy, guys. Take care.
You as well. God bless
Bye,
you and your
Nada.
family.
Thanks.
God bless.
All right, well, let's wrap up here. We had a few super chats I wanted to address. I was saving them. One came in from Alt Monarch, just threw in $5 and says, not defending Stalin, but he was raised in a major patriarchal culture in Georgia. Kollontai had to shut up about feminism if she wanted to live. And I know that this was tapped into some of your research. That's why I was saving it. I wanted you to comment on it.
Yeah, that is true, but I am waiting to drop a giant research nuke that I've had in my back pocket for a little while, because when I started writing this other book that's including all of this feminist history from the East, I collaborated with Professor Richard Spence at the University of Idaho, with Mark Hackard, who you guys have probably seen on Jay's channel, and then found a couple of people in Russia to help me find like primary source material. And I found out some very interesting things about Kollontai, because up until now, all of the Western historians have had to speculate on why she was the only Bolshevik that Stalin did not purge. She lasted, I mean, she died a natural death in the 50s. She was allowed to retain a diplomatic post all through World War II. And they've always had this speculation of why Stalin didn't take her out, especially since she was so feminist and she fought with Lenin, who she adored. So it's always been this weird mystery of how did she survive the purges? And I think I may have found the answer, and I don't think anyone else has ever found it. But if I get to do fourth hour this Friday with Jay, I think we're going to talk about it then. So I'm going to save it for that.
There you
but
go.
I might have found the answer to this question that people have been looking for a long time.
I'm sensing some type of romantic fling, sexual circles. You don't have to answer.
It's complicated. It's complicated,
Okay.
and it has to do with some
it.
crazy stuff. So, I mean, these people are always involved in crazy stuff, right? So,
next one was young old boy threw in 2 Canadian. He said he wanted to tell Rachel Elijah gave big shout out on Nightly Offensive.
Thank you, Elijah. I love him. I've been on his show once before, and I have a lot of sympathy for what he's been through with a certain personality.
Yes.
Who I do not like. And so thanks, Elijah. I really appreciate you.
Excellent. And thank you, young old boy. And then Alt Monarch is through another one that I wanted you to address. The Soviet Union witches joined the war to avenge the deaths of their husbands and children. Many of them were extremely effeminate, loved men, and went back to traditional gender roles after the war. Are you familiar with this?
The thing about when you're studying Russia, it's so complicated because half of it's in Europe, half of it's in Asia, and there's Russians who came from like Norway and Finland, and then there's Russians who came from Central Asia or Siberia and have like a lot of pagan folk magic background and things like that. So like the religious history of Russia took me like 6 months to go through and kind of learn where all the different weird things came from and how Orthodoxy, becoming the dominant religion there, and how in certain sects those things got woven together. So they have like a really complicated ethnic and religious history, but it wouldn't surprise me because there's more witch doctors in Russia than there are actual like medical doctors to this day.
Wow.
So they still have a lot of that going on over there.
Yes, and I knew that the Slavic culture, generally speaking, that witches play a prominent role. And I knew within Ukrainian and Russian culture, I mean, Ukrainians are Russians, basically, that was, I didn't know it was more than actual medical doctors, but I know that Orthodoxy has had a long fight against magic within Russia and within the Slavic peoples. So, Alt Monarchist, thank you so much, brother, for that support. And then Satan Slayer threw in $20, says, nice. I always cringe when I hear men referring to their wives as the boss. Oh yeah,
me too.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that the boss wives are never happy people?
No.
Can you think of a boss wife who's just a happy person? No, they're always angry, they're always bitching, they're always complaining, they're always miserable, and they hate their husbands. They resent their husbands. I know many of these, like, personally, like, especially people that are a little bit older than me. I feel like this is a very typical Gen X boomer setup where you've got the yes, dear, happy wife, happy life kind of husband. And then you've got the he ain't going to tell me nothing. I do what I want type of like a wife. And they're always miserable. They always just like hate life.
Yeah, I've noticed the exact same thing. And that's where I've never met, not that there haven't been successful relationships, but certainly I've never seen a thriving and happy couple where the gender dynamics were reversed in regards to the roles they occupied. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Satan Slayers. Thank you so much, brother, for that super chat. I really do appreciate the support. And the very last one comes from my beloved brother, Thomas Henderson. Throws in $10 and says, patriarchy is a feature of hierarchy, which is from the Greek hierarchia, rule of a high priest. sacred order or divine rank. Everything is rooted in the Father and in Christ, the high priest. Interesting way Orthodoxy fits the Theotokos into this picture. Yeah, and we didn't even get into the Theotokos as one who says yes to God, one who maintains her purity, one who is a mother, right? These virtues that the manosphere wants to give lip service to, or at least talk about, oh, the sexual marketplace value, but they have no worldview to justify why purity would be good. You know, well, evolutionary, they want to know that the children are theirs.
Right.
Okay, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
And to make oh, I want a virgin so I know that the children's mine. That's a retarded argument for why a woman should be a virgin. There's more to it. That's spiritual, it's moral. And so, yeah, Thomas makes an absolutely great point. Patriarchy is a feature of hierarchy, coming from the Greek word hierarchia, meaning rule of the high priest, sacred order, divine rank. Everything is rooted in the Father and Christ, the high priest. Interesting way Orthodoxy fits the Theotokos in the picture. Great point, Thomas.
Yep.
And then Wicked Wally comes back with $2 more and says, when witches make breakfast, it's a toaster coven. Where does he?
Wally.
This guy. I've seen him on the Crucible. It's amazing that you come up with all these jokes, Wicked Wally. God bless you. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat, man. Your dad jokes are endless. I will say it is.
True.
It is the eighth wonder of the world, Wicked Wally. And then Young Old Boy closes us out with $2 more Canadian dollars. Says Elijah called you the most based woman on the internet. Wow.
Let's go.
High praise
Let's
there
go.
by Elijah.
I'll take it.
Dang. Gosh. All right.
Good.
That is ending on a high note for sure. So thank you so much, Young Old Boy. And Rachel, what can I say? Thanks so much for hopping on again. It's always fun to chat with you. It's always fun to go back and forth. You're killing it as always. Every time we talk, there's always something new and big that you're a part of. So when you do blow up even more.
I've been very blessed that my message, which is so controversial to so many people, is actually being pretty well received by most people. And if, like, I always try to leave you guys with white pills. I always try to leave you with something, you know, like, I know we all have orthodoxy, but sometimes in this world, you're like, just give me like a little bone, right? Just give me something. And I will say that there's been more and more women following me and more women messaging me or commenting on my channel or my Twitter saying, you know, it was really hard for me because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, or I wanted to be a more traditional wife. I wanted to have a lot of kids and homeschool, but I just felt like there was all this pressure around me that I couldn't do it. But when I watch your streams or I read your book, it makes me feel like I can do it. It makes me feel like I have an argument to justify my own decisions to the people around me, or like I have something to ground my, you know, my decision to be a mom in. And that, like, that's all I ever wanted, honestly, out of doing any of this. That's all I ever wanted, was just to kind of make other women feel like, no, it's okay. It's okay. You're awesome if you stay home and you raise your kids. And especially if you're homeschooling them, you're keeping your marriage together. You love and respect your husband instead of fighting him and challenging him all the time. That's cool. Good for you. You're awesome. There's nothing wrong with you. Don't listen to Beyonce. Don't listen to Taylor Swift. Who wants to be these miserable old witches, right? So the fact that a lot of women are coming around and they just feel a sense of relief. They're like, oh, you mean I can just be a woman? I can be like a woman like I want to be? And I'm like, yeah, you can. And they're like, okay. So even though it may seem sometimes like, Rachel, why are you so mean on Twitter? Why are you aggressive? Why do you want to debate? Because I'm kind of, whether I want to be or not, I'm kind of the person who's at the forefront of this for the women. I'm trying to protect all of the other women who just want to be normal wives and mothers, and like kind of fight on their behalf so that they feel like, yeah, see, she gets it. And they have like, you know, some of my arguments or my points that I make that they can use in their own life when people around them are being like, you shouldn't stay home. It's risky. What if your husband becomes abusive? You know what I mean? All that stuff.
Yeah.
So I just want to enable them and make them feel comfortable. Like, yes, this is a valid, good choice to make with your life.
Yep. Totally agree. Well, you're doing great work, and it's clearly making waves. When you get big and famous, think of little old me. Give me a shout out every now and again. I'd appreciate it.
Well, Patrick, you still have like 8 times the Instagram followers that I have, so not everybody
Still.
can be a beautiful Instagram e-celeb like Patrick.
Yeah, right.
So maybe you can teach me your way.
Yeah, you're the one on
bit.
all the big podcasts.
Well, you're doing plenty of big podcasts, and I have some ideas because there's some bigger podcasts I've been working with who are like, who are some men that we can bring on, and I'm like, I have this friend.
Give me a shout out, yes, please.
Yeah,
I need the exposure. Well,
you do.
Rachel,
like that's the thing. Honestly, is like people should be following you. People should be following you and my husband and like you, Andy, Zen Shapiro. There's a bunch of guys in this sector that are really amazing and really talented. Jim Bob's another one. Super talented guy. Like I'm always in awe of you guys with your creativity and all of your work.
Yep.
So I'm gonna put you guys everywhere that I possibly can.
Yeah, please. And I think one of the reasons why you're so successful, though, obviously you do great work. I love your research. It's totally top notch. But in this world that we live in now in the West, a woman almost has to say it because, and I think that Pearl and yourself and other people have sort of been breaking lack of a better word, a glass ceiling, if you will, or certainly the Overton window, speaking about patriarchy in positive terms, because it allows then men to say that the same things, and it's not as, I don't know, it's seen as threatening by the society or the system because you're being a homeschool, stay-at-home mom with children. It's like, oh, well, she can say it, but if all the young boys and all the guys started saying it, then it's a problem. But
then they're misogynist. They just want to abuse everyone, right? So I have like this obligation to come out and be like, no, my husband is amazing, and anything I've done, he's literally enabled me to do. My male friends who are around me, like Patrick and Jay and Jim Bob and all these wonderful guys who are great husbands, great dads, great leaders, and doing wonderful creative things with all of their gifts. They're not abusing me. They're not taking advantage. Like, where is my oppression, right? So I kind of am obligated to come out and be like, I'm okay. I'm thriving and doing well. And this is not a problem. Like, it's not scary. It's not evil. It's not bad. The patriarchy is not bad. It's better for women. And that's why I kind of have to always come out with lots of data and research and arguments to break this programming, because it's just a false batch of assumptions people are operating on nowadays. So.
It's true. It's true. And it's a fact just by looking at how popular this content is, not necessarily this stream, but the manosphere relationship. This is hot right now. And it's because as Jet, it's a young man who's 23 going to law school, it's not easy. And whether you're male or female, people can feel as sort of something's broken in the sexual relations between male and female. And I would say it ties back to our topic today and men becoming patriarchs and men being leaders and turning away from, the Jezebel, the Lilith spirit of the world, being manipulated, as Nana said, by the hoe, the get out of the hoe phase. You can't be manipulated by female sexuality. And once you're able to get through that, men can rightfully occupy the role that they need to occupy. So keep doing what you're doing. We love you. Shout out to the Wilsons. God bless Andrew. Love both you guys and wish you guys nothing but the best. Tell people again, you're. Oh, I didn't at you let me at you at the in the title. So everybody go follow her, Rachel_Wilson. Tell everybody where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, I'm just Rachel Wilson on YouTube. If you search me, I come up everywhere.
Or Rachel Wilson.
Yeah, and you can find my book on Amazon. It's Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. Definitely check out my Substack, rwilson.substack.com. I have a ton of articles and stuff. I'm trying to dedicate a little bit more of that as I can to the Substack, because you can't always put everything in a book, right? And sometimes it's nice to have a shorter article that still has all the main points and like arguments and data and historical facts and all that stuff. So definitely check that out. And then Twitter at Rach for Patriarchy. Rach, the number 4, Patriarchy.
You're always making waves over there.
Fight with feminists all day.
Every time I log in, I see you and Andrew going at somebody, causing little ripples out there. But hey, that's how we get the conversation going and make change. So God bless you guys and everything you're doing. Guys, her link, if you want to go follow her YouTube channel, make sure you stay up to date with her stuff, and you can follow it by clicking her name in the video title. I've added Rachel.Wilson is the handle on YouTube. Go give her a follow. Rachel, thank you so much again. God bless you guys. And I will be back tomorrow covering and rebutting a few hit pieces that have come out against me. So
let's go.
I will see you all tomorrow evening. But as always, somebody just threw in another super chat real quick. Shout out to Derek G. Derek G throws in $20 Canadian, no comment. Thank you so much, Derek G. God bless you, brother. Really, really appreciate it. Just in the nick of time. Thank you so much, Derek G. But I will be back tomorrow night. Rachel, thank you. And as
Thanks
always,
for having me back, Patrick.
until next time, God bless.